NFL free agency has led off with a bang, with tons of signings, a lot of sticker shock, and a ton of opinions all across the internet. We have seen rapid change in dynasty rankings, a ton of proclamations. Tonight, Dynasty Points is going to sit down and dive into everything NFL free agency and how it affects your dynasty rosters. Get set, get locked in. It's time for Dynasty Points.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Oh, yes, we're here. We're ready. Tons of news today. Not a lot of time to really dive in with pleasantries. That being said, I'm your host, Tom Sipple. Joining me this week is Ryan Heath, Jacob Sanderson. You can find socials on the descriptions. I suggest going and following. No Lucas Gilbert this week. He'll actually be back in a couple of weeks. He's got to get himself situated. Tons of news. I honestly had a hard time thinking.
Going through reintegration right now for myself.
Yeah. Absolutely. So on today's show,
Dr. Agavi is going to have him in fine form.
We have the Seahawks fallout. We have obviously going to talk a lot because that one domino, Geno Smith, caused a lot of other things to happen. We have the quarterbacks on the move and possibly on the move. We have weapons in new places, tons of offensive players, fantasy related players getting on the move. And we are going to talk some quiet winners and losers. Any player that we really don't get to in the main other portions of the show. No 5 for 5 this week. There's just too much to get into. I know you guys keep telling us, where are the 3-hour episodes? Maybe 2. We'll get to 2. 3 hours. I don't know if we'll ever make it back to that.
I don't know. I got to do laundry tonight. I tried to do it last night, and there was a person using up all 6 machines. It was ridiculous.
The worst. With that being said, I do want to ask just one question. We don't have to go too far into detail because we're obviously going to talk about a ton of these moves. Jacob, I think everyone listening knows what yours is, but what is the one move that kind of hit you in your feels the hardest?
Like good or bad? What do you mean by the feel?
Either or. What move gave you the most emotion?
Yeah, I mean, I guess 2, right? I mean, from like a football perspective, fantasy especially, like I'm most excited to talk about the whole like Seahawks vortex and everything that kind of gets associated with that and all the different dominoes, because I think it'll lead to some very fascinating conversations. Like obviously the moves that I cared about the most personally were just the Colts moves. I was so excited on Monday. You know, we finally actually structured contracts like serious NFL teams, finally addressed the secondary. And then, yeah, the Daniel Jones thing was like really annoying to me, but it's not the worst thing that could have happened, I suppose. It's not the best thing either, but it is what it is.
I think that's a fair one, Ryan.
Yeah, I'll do exactly what Jacob did. I'll give you one of each. So the one that annoyed me was Josh Palmer, because as we talked about before the show, just knew that was going to come with some internet discourse, which is my least favorite internet discourse, is anything to do with Josh Palmer. And in terms of like, as a football fan, like this is going to be fun. Devontae to the Rams. That's pretty fun to me. Like,
that rocks.
It rocks for fantasy for him. Obviously, you've kind of got like the storyline now of the Rams are going to be releasing Cooper Kupp. He's going to be pissed off, probably washed, but pissed off, trying to prove everybody wrong somewhere else. Like that's like the most fun thing to me, I think, coming out of the weekend.
Yeah, I think for myself, the thing that kind of drove me nuts the most is just generally seeing people not understand what the prices mean. Obviously, every year people fail to realize what contracts are actually about. We do this for franchise tags every year. It's like watching, baseball fans not understand arbitration. Like, we have to understand what the contract percentages are and why it's more important than the total. That's what annoyed me just in general for all of these moves. What made me the most sad is a long time.
real, Thomas? Isn't it crazy that every time someone gets signed, we learn the salary cap isn't real?
Yeah,
This is so
yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
I guess
Derek
someone
Carr has been
told me
restructured
salary
to
cap
count
is
like
real, Thomas, but guys are getting paid. I don't understand.
Yeah. A real NFL team is awarding like $60 of their salary, $60 million of their salary cap to Derek Carr on various restructures, but the salary cap is not real. The Saints will be restructuring Derek Carr through like 2037.
And then still using all that savings to go and sign Chase Young to a massive contract.
The Saints are paying, well, not paying because it's all paid out, but $9 million of Saints cap space this year is being devoted to Michael Thomas. So that's, eventually it does catch up.
There you go.
Next year, you're going to tell me Jimmy Graham, and I would have believed you. Like you could have said a lot of names, and I'd have been like, oh yeah, that sounds about right.
There's nothing more fun other than playing Remember That Guy than just playing like Name That Saint and typing him into Spotrac just to see like, wonder where their void years extend to. Like it's just every time you look up a Saints contract on Spotrac, it's like trying to read the Rosetta Stone. It is like absurd.
It's like the NFL's Bobby Bonilla Day, where they're just trying to figure out on what day each year they're paying a retired player.
They're going to be paying like Alvin Kamara void years in 2033. Like
I'm just waiting to see if they're still paying Vilma somewhere. Like that'd be that's probably as far back as it goes. But I'll say what was really sad for me as a longtime Hollywood Brown guy. I mean, the first 3 articles I ever wrote were just about Hollywood Brown, and seeing him get less than De'Ami Brown money made me like audibly gasp. And then on top of that, watching DeAndre Hopkins get half of what he got, to me, it's more just sadness of seeing like things come to an abrupt end for certain players in fantasy. So that was kind of the negative for me. And the positive is like players I've really liked all offseason as buys, like Christian Kirk getting some opportunity, and those are kind of my favorite parts. Nothing too specific. I don't want to ruin some of the stuff for the show, obviously, but yeah, some positive, some negatives there for sure, and definitely feel Ryan's pain on the Josh Palmer stuff for sure. That being said, gentlemen, I say we dive right into it because the juiciest part of this was obviously the Seattle Seahawks. They opened the door for waves of moves with 4 teams involved, and it kind of changed everything. And what I mean by that is you had Geno Smith, he gets traded from Seattle to Las Vegas for a 25 third round pick. And then that leads to and DK gets traded as well from Seattle to Pittsburgh for a 25 second round pick. They then signed him to a massive contract extension at 5 years, $150 million. And then that left the door to be open briefly for like an Aaron Rodgers. But if you read the tea leaves, it was going to be Sam Darnold. He ends up at the Seahawks now, 3 years, $100 million with 55 guaranteed. It's basically the Baker Mayfield contract. Which obviously, and you're like, what about the 4th team? Well, that obviously set the stage for JJ McCarthy to officially be the starter. People were genuinely concerned that he may not be. So one team sends one domino, and it kind of changed the landscape of free agency. So Jacob, I'll toss it over to you first. Where do you want to start with that?
Well, I'll start with maybe the quarterbacks and just sort of how they all tie together. So, it's a common topic for me on this program. It's always one of my hobby horses. And we talked a ton about fact of quarterbacks, environments, how those intermingle in and around the draft. We talked about it a lot preseason with Darnold and a lot throughout the season and postseason with, how much of this big 2024 was Sam Darnold resuscitating himself, how much of it was the environment. On the other side, it's like, it's hard, I think, to find 2 quarterbacks that are more heavily featured in the discussion of sort of the people that are more on the statistical side of quarterback analysis and the people that are more on the sort of film / a lot of the stats or just tell you about the environment side of the debate than Geno and Darnold on opposite ends. And so seeing this sort of play out, you never get a perfect test case on these things, but this is like as close as it gets to me. You get Geno goes to a different environment. You get Sam Darnold, who exits this environment in Minnesota, comes right back into where Geno just left. And then you get JJ McCarthy, who's, kind of a black box prospect going into Minnesota that people have a lot of questions about. And it's an interesting spot, I think, for fantasy or for betting, because to an extent, I think, like, depending on your perspective on all these things, you get a chance to make a reasonably correlated bet. Depending on what you think of one or two of these players or one or two of these principles, I think you can make a correlated bet across the outcomes of three of these teams. So, anyone who follows me, I think, knows what my position is on this, which is that I think that environment matters a ton for NFL quarterback play. And I want to quantify a little bit what I mean by that, because I think sometimes, when you're tweeting in Twitter in 40 characters, that maybe some of the context gets lost. Like, no, I don't think that literally anyone, as in like me, Ryan, or Tom, could go and have 30 touchdowns playing quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, And I don't think it's quite as simple as like turn bad quarterback into average quarterback into good quarterback. But it's about specific traits, and it's about a scheme and players that are able to build around what a player does well. And so when we're talking about Sam Darnold specifically, like, one of the reasons I was very confident that Darnold would have a very good season last year for as long as he got to play there was he has legitimate arm talent. And legitimate, not just arm strength, but can be accurate when he's throwing out of a clean pocket. And we talked about this a little bit last year, but the Darnold offense last year, 3.08 seconds time to throw. That's the only quarterbacks that were longer were Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, which are quarterbacks that are, clearly much more scrambling quarterbacks, improvising quarterbacks compared to what a Sam Darnold is going to provide you. Also had 6.9 average air yards per catch. So how far the ball traveled on average. That was the fourth highest in the NFL. And then we see this kind of high varying style, like the sixth highest big time throw rate, also the sixth highest turnover worthy play rate. And a fascinating spot with him is, he was a guy that, despite having relatively average pressure rates, had almost the same pressure rate as Geno Smith in total, despite having this extremely long time to throw. Geno Smith, similar pressure rate to Sam Darnold, pressured on 38.5% of his dropbacks last season, despite having the 11th quickest time to throw. So essentially, he's getting rid of the ball way faster than Sam Darnold is. The pressure's getting there right away because the offensive line is worse. Going back into the Geno stats, this is the guy where, to me, the film and the stats paint a picture of a guy who was a lot better than his environment. Talk about the time to throw stuff. Geno Smith, 8th in success rate last year, 13th in EPA per dropback, 3rd in on-target rate among his passes, 5th in completion percentage over expectation, and 1st in explosive pass rate. So a lot of top 10s figures. Thing dragging that down is, of course, the EPA. Part of that is that his actual rate of interceptions way higher than his rate of turnover-worthy plays. And part of that is that he's taking more sacks than I think he's frankly responsible for based on the pressure. Out of all full-time starters over the last 3 years, so the 3 years that Geno's had the full quarterback job in Seattle, Geno faced a quick pressure rate, meaning pressure in less than 2.5 seconds, of 18.1%. That's the highest rate of any quarterback in the NFL during that time period. And was still able to provide effectively slightly above average EPA and a lot more above average in stats to potentially isolate what he can do from a clean pocket. All that to say, I think what I expect to happen is that JJ McCarthy can execute a lot of what Sam Darnold was able to execute. He has the sufficient mobility to run around those bootlegs. He has a live enough arm to complete those intermediate deep passes. And he's going to be in, frankly, an even better situation than Darnold was just in, where he gets all the same skill players. Plus, they just added Ryan Kelly and Will Fries on the offensive line. I think Darnold, it's going to be interesting in Seattle. I really like the schematic fit with Kubiak. They're going to probably run a lot more two tight end stuff. They might use a fullback more. It's not going to be this spread quick game offense that it was under Ryan Grubb. I think that's a much better fit for, frankly, anyone, but Darnold especially. But the offensive line is still really bad. Hopefully they'll address it in the draft. But they weren't able to address any of the premium offensive line options in free agency. So I think we're going to see, it's not like Darnold's strengths go away. It's going to be an offense that's going to rely on him to more frequently drop back to pass against a significant pass rush and then maintain his composure and read the defense quickly and find guys quickly, which I don't think he's going to be able to do as effectively as he did in Minnesota. As for Geno in Las Vegas, I think it's like a fine situation. It's not like the greatest situation on earth, but their offensive line is largely passable. Pete Carroll's always gotten the most out of dudes, and I think Chip Kelly's an interesting offensive coordinator pick. He has Brock Bowers. I think he's going to be quite good. So that's my take on those guys. But I think it's a fun spot where, if you feel similarly to me, or if you feel the opposite and you're a Darnold believer, you can make this correlated bet against or for a number of dudes, depending on what you think is driving these quarterbacks' recent success or lack of success.
Yeah, a lot of that's really well said. I think we have to expect them to just live off of play action pretty much as much. For me, what I think see with this Darnold and Seattle relationship is kind of the ups and downs of his Carolina era, right? He had some big peaks, right? I call him the 2022 league winner, Sam Darnold, for a reason, right? He obviously had phenomenal games. Then he had absolutely god off. I think that's kind of the up and down. Their offensive line wasn't great either. He had one really good, well, he had two if you count McCaffrey, but one really good receiver at the time, which is DJ Moore. I think JSN is kind of locked. I don't think there's really a lot to have to panic for him, but it's going to be interesting to see him, how this offense, the offense is going to operate differently. Like you said, probably a lot more two tight end, a lot less of this quick throw type offense. I'm interested. I think for Dynasty overall, it pretty much secures your quarterback bags, which is, now you have just a solid QB2 for both of these guys when one of these guys could have gotten significantly nerfed. So Ryan, let's hear what you got to say.
Yeah. So I'll start with the two that I think are less interesting. So that would be McCarthy and Geno. McCarthy, I'm largely going to echo Jacob's thoughts that I think most quarterbacks can probably succeed in this environment. We both in real life and for fantasy, we have seen Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins put up QB1 worthy fantasy numbers in this exact same system. We have seen those levels of quarterbacks operate with a top 5 pass rate over expectation. We know that Kevin O'Connell is going to run a decent ship for fantasy production for the quarterback, for everybody involved. I don't think that much really changes there. In Vegas with Geno, it's mostly an upgrade to the pass catchers is how I'm really looking at it. Jacob, before this program, told me I'd be the stat nerd tonight, but he just totally out stat nerded me. Just came
I always have my Geno stats close. We talked about why am I upset about what the Colts did, because we could have traded a third round pick for Geno Smith. But anyway. Yeah.
So Geno Smith, only stat I would add to that is, yes, top 5 in catchable throw rate. That's great for all the receivers there. Brock Bowers especially included. I think he's probably the biggest winner in fantasy of anyone, I would say, from this weekend is Brock Bowers.
I have
Brock Bowers, a real
75-1 Brock Bowers Offensive Player of the Year tickets that I just got. You can still get that number.
I'm sorry, but
okay, yeah.
We not give any love here to the GOAT wide receiver, late round wide receiver favorite in Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, Myers
he could have legit died if they got a quarterback that could only find one guy, Justin Fields, but a legitimate quarterback that can prop up multiple assets. And you're telling me I could possibly get wide receiver 2 production Jacoby again at a discount?
Yeah.
Bowers was expected to be great and amazing. I think the biggest winner here is actually Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, I think it's very possible that this can be a top 3 tight end and a top 24 wide receiver. There's no one else on the team.
Exactly. Yeah. And
we got a draft to go through, but Jacoby's just #good.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers walking into a 27% target share like he normally does with little other target competition, or in a highly condensed offense with just him and Bowers. Yeah, it's going to be good stuff for fantasy. That's all good. I think the most interesting one here is Darnold. Because, as Jacob said, it's a at least a pretty good schematic fit. The Kubiak system, it's all the McShanahan system, right? Like that's Brett Whitefield approved officially. We're allowed to compare those systems now. It's not just the thing us fantasy nerds are saying. Came out of Brett Whitefield's mouth today. Right. So we can say it. It's locked in, baby.
But Ryan tried to make fun of me for that.
I did not try to make fun of you for that. I tried to make fun of Dan Orlovsky for that in our
DMs. Okay, fair.
I did not try to make fun of you for that. But just thinking about this fit with Kubiak is interesting to me because he is kind of like the play action guy, right? Especially in those first few games this year with the Saints before their entire offense got completely destroyed. They were near the top of the league in the play action, in the motion rates. Very interestingly to me, also, Darnold was very efficient on play action in Minnesota. Fifth highest adjusted net yards per attempt on play action dropbacks last year. Derek Carr right ahead of him in fourth place. Just under 10 yards per attempt on play action dropbacks. I would expect similarly, yes, this is how Darnold on a per dropback to dropback basis, Darnold can hit highs, I think, in this offense. Sure. But yeah, there's not going to be the same personnel, especially on the offensive line, that he enjoyed in Minnesota. We're not going to get to watch him like standing back in the pocket for 4 seconds and chuck it downfield to Justin Jefferson. That's like not what's going to happen here exactly, right? So I do think it's interesting. I guess in hindsight, like the Seahawks shipping off Metcalf, releasing Lockett, just literally getting down to only JSN in their wide receiver room does make a little bit more sense with what we know about Kubiak. This isn't like a system that needs 2 or 3 wide receivers that they're heavily investing in that are running a ton of routes. We're going to get to talk about JSN in the Rashid Shaheed downfield role finally. Downfield
target. Do you think so? Because I think JSN is going to be in the Olave role, and I think that Rashid Shaheed is TBD. Whoever they take. I mean, they have 2 round 2 picks. They have 2 round 3 picks, and I think 1 or 2 of those is going to go to a receiver. I suspect they'll take us. Like, to me, it's like Trey Harris in the Rashid Shaheed role, or it's.
I'd be into that.
Derek Brown thinks Jaden Higgins in round 2.
Sure, like they're going to draft someone I highly suspect.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's Isaiah Bond in the Reed Sheet role or whatever, Matthew Golden. But like it's going to be, I think it's going to be someone else. And I'm wondering with JSN, like, is it even? It's a good offense for JSN in the sense that they're going to have a bunch of non-target earning players on the field all the time. Like they're going to have fullbacks on the field. They're going to have multiple tight ends on the field. So that's going to condense things for him. But he's not going to really play in the slot anymore because they're very rarely going to have a slot wide receiver probably in these formations in this offense, which is, I think, pretty notable considering that's where he's had a lot of success. And I don't think he's going to get a ton of those cover 3 beating seam routes. I think that's probably going to go to another wide receiver. So I would think that the floor is pretty high here for JSN. I don't know if I love the ceiling scenarios for JSN in this offense and with Darnold.
Yeah, I think this is kind of what I expect is JSN is going to turn into like the yards per route run darling, which will be very funny after years of him being the opposite of that. Because whenever you get these offenses where it's only 1 or 2 wide receivers on the field at a time, that always juices the yards per route run numbers. It's less target competition, as you said. We just kind of see that generally in these McShanahan systems. They always juice the yards per route run for all of the weapons. So I wouldn't be surprised if I'd expect a much more balanced offense compared to what we saw under Grubb last year. And it just becomes like, oh, well, if JSN could just run more routes, meanwhile, he ran like the 4th most routes in the league last year. And we saw that the efficiency wasn't the same. So I'm wondering, little like mental prop bet, I guess, that maybe that's the discourse we're doing 6 months from now.
Well, it matters too that they might need to go with more tight end or fullback or other bodies just to help in protection, which is a big thing.
Yeah,
but I don't think what you have to hope for with someone like JSN with Darnold in there is that he's not typecast into the underneath, never go deep, because we saw it right when DK was out. That was the JSN coming out party. Oh man, I just hope and pray that DK is gone one day and we just get alpha. It's kind of here now, and we have a quarterback.
No,
with
I think he can win downfield.
Well,
to be like he has that skill set. For sure.
That's what I mean. I'm hoping he's not typecast, because if he's typecast, then we have a problem. But I don't know if we can copy and paste like a role with, because we don't know how he's going to operate with the tight ends. There's no Taysom Hill to worry about. All I know is for a brief time last year, Kubiak had people saying that the Saints offense was all the way back. And then it fizzled out because of reasons like Derek Carr. I think JSN is going to be really good. I think the immediate boost of better learn 1-2 turn JSN was a little bit premature. I think his current price is baked into DK kind of being gone. I felt at wide receiver 11 and 12. I feel like that's probably kind of where he belongs in this. Speaking of ADPs, one thing we didn't touch on is these three guys right here. Geno Smith going at QB 26. He's a round 10 pick. He's pick 113. DK Metcalf in Pittsburgh, which is kind of an iffy situation. We didn't talk about that a lot here. But wide receiver 27, a 7th round pick at pick 76. And Sam Darnold, this is as of today over the last month at Dynasty Data Lab. Sam Darnold, QB 24, round 8, pick 86. I mean, you want to talk about wins for the late round quarterback, folks. This is it. I'm in heaven, right? With free agency news. We're going to talk about field and stuff later, but out of these three, are we looking at major ADP shifts with some of these guys? Like maybe I could see DK, but these other quarterbacks feel like they're kind of locked in.
I don't think DK that much. I mean, the contract is awesome for him, but it's not like he was at any risk of being out of the NFL. And it's not a great spot, really. We'll talk about it in a second. Probably the biggest boost to me, I mean, Darnold gets a boost too, for sure. That prior to the Seattle spot opening up, the talk was that the market on him was colder than anticipated. And it looked like he might not get the big payday that he ends up getting. So it ends up being a really nice outcome for him to get that 3 for $100 contract, to get the guarantees on the second year, where, that essentially means I think he's pretty locked into starting all of 2025. And it should be our expectation that he's at least starting in 2026, about 50% chance. And then Geno, I think it's a boost too. You see the 3rd round pick and you first go, oh, they want to get out of Geno. And the reporting comes out, they offer him between 40 to 45 million per year. Geno said no, and it hasn't been signed yet, but by all accounts, he's about to finalize a multi-year extension with Las Vegas. That'll probably take him towards essentially when he's just done as a player. But at this point, you're looking at probably locking in 2 plus more years of Geno as a starting quarterback in the NFL for a guy you can draft outside of the top 24. That's, an obvious value in any sort of Superflex Dynasty format that people should be pumped about grabbing.
Yep, absolutely agree with that. The DK Metcalf fit, I think, is I talked to Brett Whitefield about this when it was happening, and he said he loves it for DK, but he has no idea what to do with someone like George Pickens and how this offense, because George Pickens last year, I fought back against the general love at FantasyPoints for George Pickens. I was the guy against the grain there, and it was a target issue for me. Now it's a bigger target issue for me with both of them. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. I think DK Metcalf is probably going to be overreacted to, and judging by some of the trades out here that I'm looking at on Dynasty Daddy, DK Metcalf in a 2nd or Devontae Adams in a 3rd, I think is very interesting to me. DK Metcalf or DJ Moore straight up from today.
I would take Moore, I think, but those guys are definitely in the same tier, I think.
We've got the 105 straight up for DK.
Weak class, but I'll still take the 105 just on the chance of a crazy value accrual. Because DK has DK ever been a wide receiver 1 in points per game base? Maybe once.
I believe I think
I would think once tops, right? And it would have been a low end.
Once, barely, maybe. Yeah.
Once barely, maybe. I'm willing to buy that. I'm sure he was either just barely a wide receiver 1 or just missed. Doesn't really matter. The bulk of his career, he has been a mid to low wide receiver 2 in fantasy. And I would say in most of those spots in better environments than he's walking into. Now, the nice thing is, he is good, and they just gave him an extension that's essentially $33 million per year because the first 18 of that 150 was already being paid to him. So the extra years is 4 by 33. I suspect they will be finding ways to get him the ball, so to speak. So that stuff's all good. But I don't know. I think I'm really, really pumped to see this real life version of this offense. I mean, unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers is probably going to be part of it, so that's going to be kind of annoying. But
I think it adds to the allure.
It does. I think there's look, I can't speak for George Pickens' personality. He seems honestly quite unpleasant. But assuming that he is on the Pittsburgh Steelers and desires to play football, which I will say that I really want him to be on the Pittsburgh Steelers and wanted to play football, because I'm very fascinated to see this wide receiver pairing. I don't know of a wide receiver pairing that's really quite like this in the NFL, where you have these two wide receivers who neither of whom is elite, but both are very good, and they're both very similar. And it's going to be, I think, fun to watch because, the immediate takes, everybody is saying, well, it's duplicative. They're redundant. You don't need two of these guys. The other take is George Pickens is going to have a fit because DK Metcalf's going to, ask for number 14, and he's going to have his big check. And, George Pickens is going to hold out or go on a killing spree or both. And that's a concern. But putting aside the psychological elements, I love the idea because you go both these wide receivers threatening down the field, even though you're probably not going to have that good of a quarterback. I bet that they face one of the league's highest rates of cover 2 and nickel and dime coverages on early downs, because the whole thing with these guys is if you leave them one-on-one on an island, they're terrifying, but they're not actually that refined. So if you only have one and you just orient your whole defense towards stopping them, you'll probably stop them. But if you have two, you can't really do that. And the only way to do that with any sort of success is you just fully sell out in these deep shells. And then that's Arthur Smith's music. He's going to run it a million times right down your throat every time it's 1st and 10 and you show up with 5 in the box. So I think it's a really fun concept. If you have to accept the premise that you're going to have a probably Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson as your quarterback, and you're going to have Arthur Smith as your offensive coordinator, this is, to me, the way you maximize that. You just have an old, frail quarterback who teams would otherwise load the box on. You send these wide receivers deep, and then you just run it. And if anyone ever jumps up, you throw a play action. Is it going to be fun for these wide receivers in any non-best ball format? No. I think they're going to have a -9 pass rate over expectation. They're going to play egregiously slow, whether it's Russ or Rodgers. Both of these quarterbacks historically have really low pace of play. And they're going to run 53 plays per game, and 60% of them are going to be runs. But there'll be some fun 3 for 120 in 2 games that'll go in your best ball portfolios, and I think it'll be very interesting to watch in real life.
Yeah, I'm fully with Jacob here on real life's going to be fun. From a human perspective, it's going to be very fun. Especially if it's Aaron
Rodgers. Rodgers is going to be hey, George, run this route. He's I don't feel like it. You're let's see how this goes.
Yeah, we're going to get just amazing clips on our timelines after every single weekend of whatever sideline meltdowns are ensuing. I'll be entertained. I know that for sure. From an on-field football perspective, I'm also with Jacob here. Imagine the Arthur Smith offense, in the Falcons years where they have this very efficient run game, but instead of Kyle Pitts playing your X receiver, it's DK Metcalf and George Pickens on opposite sides. That just seems like it's going to work way better. So totally with you there too. Jalen Warren to the moon, all that stuff. Let's go. But yeah, as far as the fantasy outlooks for a Metcalf or for a Pickens, it's pretty bad. So this is just the history of Arthur Smith wide receiver ones. So starting with when he was in Tennessee as an offensive coordinator in 2019, AJ Brown, 13.6 fantasy points per game on 84 total targets on the season. 2020, AJ Brown did average 17.7 fantasy points per game, but that was the year that Ryan Tannehill had like the most efficient like passing touchdown rate season of the decade or very close to it. It was like
no, you can't. All right, like everything you're saying is correct, but like you cannot be like AJ Brown did this because Ryan Tannehill did this. Ryan Tannehill did that.
Yeah, no, sorry.
AJ Brown did
I'm
this.
not meaning to take that away from AJ Brown.
AJ Brown fucking dragged Ryan Tannehill's ass to that EPA finish.
I'm not trying to take that away from AJ Brown. I'm trying to put everybody back in the headspace of the year 2020. I just want to make sure
that everyone's getting the proper amount of credit for the plus 100% fantasy points over expectation that AJ Brown scored that year.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is, for those who weren't around, this is when we had to argue on the internet about whether Ryan Tannehill was a larger impact than Derrick Henry. This was like the discourse at the time. That's like what we were talking about with that offense in the context of AJ Brown averaging over 17 fantasy points per game in an Arthur Smith offense. Okay. 2021, Kyle Pitts, the target leader, 105 targets, 10.4 fantasy points per game. Outscored by Russell Gage that year. Did not know that until I went to look this up. But that
in hindsight,
me a little bit.
Maybe that was a sign.
Yeah.
Looking back, perhaps we
should have known at that point. Yep. Yeah. 2022, Drake London, 10.7 fantasy points per game, 115 targets in an Arthur Smith high, 115 targets for his target leader. London 108, 10.9 the following year, and then Pickens last year 11.8 fantasy points per game, 100 targets. So there have almost never been multiple target earners in any of those offenses, aside from like Kyle Pitts plus Drake London, I guess is the closest you're going to get to that. So yeah, that was really fun for fantasy. This will not be for Metcalf or Pickens. I think is really the point that I was trying to make with this long drawn out trip down memory lane.
Yeah.
I'm excited because Aaron Rodgers had somebody seemingly as cool, calm, and collected as a professional as Garrett Wilson, pretty much outright saying that if he's back, I want out. And now we're going to give him volatile wide receivers to go and deal with if it's Rodgers. Like, I want the QB school to sit there and in one breakdown of Aaron Rodgers, break down his famous George Pickens effort film watch while watching Aaron Rodgers blow up on the sidelines, followed by DK throwing his helmet or losing his mind at the same time before they inevitably fight. Or the other option, if it is Russell Wilson, trying to have him have like a peace seminar that inevitably leads to a tables, ladders, and chairs match in the therapy session with Pickens and DK. Like it is pure comedy when you really think about it. All to have Arthur Smith, like you said, just run the ball.
Give you the
40
biggest
times.
winners in Pittsburgh if Aaron Rodgers signs there. I'm talking about Kate Carpico, Lauren Bossert. I'm talking about Leanna Patrone, Charles Warren. These are the first four hits that came up when I just searched find me a therapist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So they're I think are in good shape this week.
Oh, that's so good. So brilliant. I think we hit this topic as good as we can. I say we take a quick break, our first one at 39 minutes. This is going to be a long one. And when we come back, we are going to hit on quarterbacks on the move. Sit tight. Don't go anywhere. Okay, so obviously we had some quarterbacks shifting places. Now, everyone, we see your comments in the chat. We're going to hit some of these as soon as we can. We'll probably get through this segment, then we'll catch up on chat here in a little bit after and then dive in. But quarterbacks on the move, I will say this as maybe the, in my opinion, biggest driver in the late round superflex quarterback punt QB2 till it's disgusting. I need Aaron Rodgers to sign somewhere just so I have someone to play in that spot. I'll be honest. We talked a couple weeks ago about how it was actually getting harder and harder to like spot the late round QB. is the same guys that we were predicting before with Justin Fields and Daniel Jones. Here's how it shakes down with these guys. Obviously, Justin Fields, he goes to the Jets. He signs a 2-year, $40 million deal, $30 million guaranteed. This man is starting these 2 years, at least year one. He's going to score points. Jacob, you had some good points about the Garrett Wilson conversation. Obviously, Justin Fields, a smash QB 25, round 9, pick 108. We've been saying on this show for 2 years, he's a smash pick in the 9-10. Daniel Jones is an interesting one as much as it makes Jacob want to rip his eyes out. We've got a 1-year, $14 million with $13.15 million guaranteed, which seems like a super odd number, just fully guaranteed at that point. QB 34, round 18, pick 210. I'm interested in this because I said on this show, or it was the Dynasty Points market report, where I said I'm not interested at Anthony Richardson at his price. I'm interested in whoever his backup is going to be. That's Daniel Jones. They don't have to change the system as much as they did with old man Flacco, that I think is why this was a smart scheme fit type move, but we know Daniel Jones is actually terrible. And then, of course, the other biggest mover we just talked about him was Aaron Rodgers. The possibilities being Giants, Steelers, Titans. I don't know what the Titans are doing. Maybe a 1-year, $25 million is what I saw being floated around. But like Jacob said, he wants to play multiple. So those are the real QB movers out of the ones that we didn't talk about already. But let's talk about some of those guys here. Let's talk about Justin Fields first, because I think that's obviously what people want to talk about. Justin Fields truthers, especially in Pittsburgh, are excited they get another year. I'm not excited as much as for him being like an elite bounce back candidate, but you're getting 20 points. So he's just like a free QB1 at this point. But let's talk about it, Jacob.
Yeah, I think this would be a time. We'll see where his price winds up settling now that it's confirmed that he's going to have a starting job. But I suspect this would be a time that, even though he's going to get more expensive, I'm probably going to be open to Justin Fields' price this summer. There's going to be some truthers out there that still think, that he is eventually going to show us all what we thought he was going to have as a prospect. But I wouldn't say that proportion of people is actually that much higher anymore than the percentage chance that that's true. Like, I think at this point, it's like there's, I don't know, a pretty small chance that he's going to become a star, legitimate impact, several year starter. And there's a small amount of people that think that he's going to be. So I'm okay with taking that chance. And I think in most scenarios, you're going to be free rolling that. I'm very fascinated to see, this fit. Like Tanner Engstrand is going to be the offensive coordinator there. He's coming from Detroit, where he was the quarterback coach. Very, very meticulous timing-based offense. You can take that one of two ways. One end, that's obviously not what Fields' strength has been as a quarterback to this point in his career, but maybe someone who helped Jared Goff, learn the scheme and get that down pat can really help Justin Fields excel at what's held him back, I think, to this point in his career. And if he can clean some of that up in terms of his footwork, his processing speed, but the sky's the limit, because he actually is a good thrower of the football. Obviously, his mobility is incredible. So I'm optimistic. I think he's going to probably have the job to himself this year. I don't see them drafting someone in the first round or even the second round. Maybe they add someone on day 3. But I'd be pretty happy to project Fields safely as a top 15 quarterback this year in fantasy. As for the rest of this Jets team, it's bad for Breece Hall, and I think everyone mostly understands that. The Wilson stuff is interesting because I think it's, on the whole, it's bad for Garrett Wilson. I've seen some people say, yeah, well, who else were they going to get that's better? That's fair. They were not going to have good quarterback play this offseason. It seems pretty clear. But people have brought up the DJ Moore 2023 season. And I just think that is a very surface level comparison. DJ Moore was the wide receiver 9 that year. I think you'd happily take wide receiver 9 from Garrett this season for sure. I think he's going as a wide receiver 16 right now in seasonal best ball drafts. But DJ Moore did that on wide receiver 23 usage in expected fantasy points per game. So he was 3.3 points above expectation that year.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Jacob, he set the record for yards after catch on hitch routes. Like that's how
Couldn't tell you.
volatile he was. I'm not kidding. I remember this because I'm a Justin Fields hater. And when he was getting all this, trust me, look it up. I'm going to tell you that one's going to hit.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So people always bring up the target share. They're like, oh, he locks into one guy. That's also true. But what happened with Moore is like he saw, I think, a 29% target share that season. Can't really have that much higher than that. And had wide receiver 23 fantasy usage. Now he overperforms that with, like you said, a lot of yak, the hitch routes, everything like that. He had about almost 300 yards over expectation. And it's like, why is that the case? Well, when you have Justin Fields, you're going to run the ball a lot because that's what he does best. And so you're going to call a robust design quarterback running game. You're going to want to work the rushing game off of that. And then he just continues to burn so many dropbacks. Like every time you call a pass at a Justin Fields offense, there's almost a 1 in 3 chance that it's ending in a sack or a scramble or a throwaway. And so the rate at which he converts dropbacks into targets for his pass catchers is just outlier low compared to any other quarterback in the league. He scrambles more than anyone else. He gets sacked more than anybody else. And that hasn't changed yet. Unless that changed drastically. Like I saw someone say, well, he locks on to Wilson. He's going to get 170 targets. It's like, do the math on this. Because even if you assume league average pass rate, which they're not going to have a league average pass rate, like we're talking about something in the realm of 600 dropbacks, and it's like when you take 100 of those, 120 of those, and they become sacks and scrambles, even at a 30% target share, what are you left with? You're left with about 140 targets. And that's assuming that you get a league average pass rate and assuming a 30% target share. And that's now the absolute ceiling in terms of how many targets you can drive. So like the 160, 170, 180 is just like totally off the table pretty much for Garrett Wilson with Justin Fields at quarterback. Could he be efficient? Sure. Could he, manage the end zone? Absolutely. But I think you're looking at a range of outcomes now that's low end wide receiver 1 at the high end and low end wide receiver 2, probably is more likely.
Yeah. I'm mostly going to line up here with Jacob in terms of Garrett Wilson. Not to like argue back. I guess this is like the point I would accept if you were trying to be positive on Wilson here in the fit, is that kind of unlike any quarterback Wilson has played with before, Fields is willing to drop back and sling it deep, right? We've seen Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson rank near the bottom of the league in deep throw rate over the past couple seasons. Fields near the top. And we've seen his receivers rack up deep receiving production, right? I believe Pickens with Fields in those 6 games led the NFL in deep receiving yards per game. DJ Moore in 2023 was top 10. So yes, you could get like these big splash plays. That hasn't even really been kind of Garrett Wilson's thing in the league so far. I'm sure he's capable of it. It's Garrett Wilson. I'm not going to say he's not, but so yeah, that's like what you're looking for is, okay, maybe he's going to start making these big splash plays, kind of overperforming the volume like DJ Moore kind of had to. But yeah, it's just not it's not like getting me excited. Like I still see him as kind of a mid to high end wide receiver 2. Like I think that best ball ADP that Jacob read off is about right, basically. Yeah, I feel like I had more to say. With Fields himself, we've covered it pretty much. Only Lamar Jackson has more rushing yards per game than Fields over the past 3 seasons. So great for fantasy for Fields himself. Not great for anyone else. Yeah, I think we covered it pretty much.
So the stat I was talking about was in 2023, there was his 10 target, 8 receptions for 230 yards and 3 touchdown game. If I'm not mistaken, this was against Washington.
Yeah,
he had 221 of his yards gained of his 230 yards came on hitches and go routes, which was the record at the time per next gen stats. I'm pretty sure it hasn't been topped in a game since 2018. So in that season, and that was the big game, but there were multiple games where his yardage over expectations were damn near record breaking. So he played out of his mind on that. And to be fair, I think Garrett Wilson's a better receiver than DJ Moore, just personally. So there's still a chance that, yes, he can blow up, but a lot of the points you guys, it still comes down to it being Justin Fields is not a great thrower of the football, which definitely can matter, but I'm not panicking on him.
Really quickly, the only other thing I really wanted to mention was from like a DFS perspective or like a weekly game perspective, Justin Fields has kind of created these really wide man zone splits in his receivers. 2023, DJ Moore was one of the most efficient receivers against man coverage and had just had these big splits versus zone. That went away for him last year as soon as Fields went away. And we saw the same exact thing with Pickens last season. I would be on the lookout for that, like early in the season, Garrett Wilson in DFS against like these man heavy defenses. Sorry. That was the only other thing that had popped into my head.
Yep. I agree. I'm not pushing the panic button. I'm not pushing Wilson back into the mid-second, right, for startup prices. I'm not doing that. He can flirt again, I believe. I think, again, it's priced in. His quarterback was kind of priced in. He's a good player. Being a top 12 wide receiver is like more than fine. I'm not pushing him up. I'm not going to do that. We got to see what happens. I think he's been a good bargain all offseason to buy. Let's talk about the Justin Fields thing, because I see a couple of comments here in the chat. D-Bro says, trade a second for Fields now and trade him. You're not getting it, D-Bro?
You're not getting him for you haven't been getting him for a second when he didn't have a job. You couldn't get him for a second the day after he got benched for Russell Wilson.
So I'll say I've gotten a few Fields, but it's taken like a 2.6 plus a 2.10. I've made some other kind of multiple sections, just taking the bets. That's what you had to pay last year. But right now, from today, you guys want to hear some Justin Fields trades from today?
Sure.
This is why last week when I harped on the be early, not reactionary, right? Be predictive, not reactionary, and why it's so damn important and why we've been saying to do this when there's not a buying window. He was never a buy low. He's a buy low compared to what he can produce. He's not a buy low to his actual price in real leagues, and that's important to separate. We have Jalen McMillan, who basically died with the signing we're going to talk about later, and Justin Fields for Bryce Young in the 310. So that's already a 3 to 4 round ADP bump automatically, probably more. We've got him being as a throw-in with Amon-Ra to go and get Justin Jefferson, which I think is kind of interesting. But to our point, 111 or Justin Fields from today.
Fields. This draft class sucks.
Yeah, I would take Fields there. We got a 26 first and Justin Fields.
26 first.
We've got Sam Darnold straight up.
Straight up for a 26 first? Oh, wow. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
We're joining you in the modern day where he's going for 26 first. Okay. Yeah, wow.
Yep. The time to buy for a second and sell for a first just happened. Like it happened the minute ink hit paper.
Did you say Darnold for Fields? That's actually really
straight up.
Straight up. I will take Justin Fields.
Yeah,
I think I would too.
I'll take the guy I think is going to produce more this year. That's kind of.
That's a really fascinating one. I really like that.
We've got
that's fun and good for those two managers. You know, those are two managers that are not dicking around on keep trade cut. Those are two managers willing to put their conies on the table.
Yeah, I hate players
for what they believe in.
I hate same position for same position trades because it's just making a player bet, and I hate to make them. I
love it.
That one's interesting.
Staring at the manager across from you and saying, "I think I'm right and you're wrong, and we're gonna find out." I love it. You know, where's our masculinity gone in this world?
We have Najee Harris and Justin
Fields.
The
wolf mind virus killed.
I knew that was coming from you. Najee Harris and Justin Fields, or the 307 and 111. So that's basically free Najee at 307.
Yep.
And then my favorite trade, this one, two favorite trades from yesterday was Justin Fields or a 27-1 and a 27-2. That point, it's possible I win the picks there. Just you're giving me a free 2 there. Or to make Jacob's head explode, Anthony Richardson or Justin Fields straight up.
Well, definitely Fields.
I know. Look, Look what we said last year when Anthony Richardson was the 112, and we said he would be the reason for orphan teams, or could be. And we literally had in one of our longest standing dynasty leagues, the Anthony Richardson manager orphan his team today. So Shadur Fields. I'm guessing Shadur gets drafted at like 104, 105.
Yeah.
So I'll take Shadur because insulation. But
yeah, unless it's like the crazy draft day fall to like the end of the first or the second.
he has insulation for sure.
Yeah.
Should we transition from Fields into Colts though? You just mentioned Anthony Richardson.
Well, I'm getting there because we're professionals here. It's just important to point out there's a ton of conversation about Fields. We're going to have a ton of it because Fields is like one of the most polarizing players I've ever talked about. He will be. Let's get into the Indianapolis Colts. I don't think there's as much on this in terms of the signing, but I think there is a lot here in terms of Dynasty Superflex. Because again, I said take the cheap backup because I think the backup is always going to play on any team that Anthony Richardson is on because the dude just is hurt too much. Let's just face it. You could get 3 or 4 free starts from Daniel Jones, or AR just goes out there and continues to put up really bad games and Steichen makes the switch again. We'll see. But Jacob, you are our resident Colts.
Yeah. Both of these guys are going to play games this year. Like there's maybe first of all, we'll talk about like what I think the team would like to happen, right? I think ideally, I'm sure that the team is hoping that Anthony Richardson shows up to camp, is substantially improved after his first fully healthy NFL offseason, and legitimately wins the job in training camp and goes on to develop and have a lovely year. You know, that's certainly what I hope is what happens for the Colts. And I don't think that dream is dead. If you are an Anthony Richardson believer and you think that he is legitimately going to be what you hoped he was going to be, you know, Daniel Jones is not going to be the reason that he fails. If Anthony Richardson fails, Anthony Richardson is going to be the reason that Anthony Richardson fails. Daniel Jones is not preventing him from accomplishing his goals and aspirations. But I think what's more likely is these are two quarterbacks who are constantly injured and constantly inconsistent / bad. I would say it's like 60-40 that Richardson wins the job out of camp. And I largely give that spread to the fact that I think anything resembling a tie will be broken in favor of Richardson. Like I think Jones has to win this job decisively in camp to the point where you can't really go to the players after having said it's they're going to come in day one. They're going to say it's an open competition. So if you're saying it's an open competition and Daniel Jones is better, Daniel Jones has to start or you lose your credibility. So he's going to have a legitimate chance to win the job, but he's going to have to win it by a margin over Richardson. But I think whoever starts in week 1 is probably going to suck at some point, or they're probably going to get hurt at some point, and they're going to switch. And then whoever they switch to is probably going to get hurt or suck at some point. They're probably going to switch back. And I would guess that both these guys end up playing minimum 5 games. And it comes down to the wire to see who plays more. And they go 9-8 and everybody gets fired at the end of it. That seems to be like the most likely scenario for this. What's my nightmare scenario is that Richardson starts, plays poorly. Daniel Jones comes in, plays kind of sort of well, and then we become Giants 2.0 and we pay fealty to Daniel Jones. Like that's the nightmare. That's I think what I was like most hateful about this move is that it's really expensive for 1 year. Like it's essentially a $14 million deal with incentives. So there's a real opportunity cost. Like that's the same money that we just gave to Cameron Bynum. And you know, when you sign a 1 year deal, there's no void years, there's no salary cap tricks like that. All of that eats up the cap space. We could have Will Fries on the team if we just had signed like Trey Lance as our backup instead of Daniel Jones. And all you're doing is betting against yourself with the Daniel Jones signing, right? There's no actual upside to the signing, and that all it does is protect your floor if Richardson's bad. But like if Richardson's bad, then this team isn't going anywhere anyways, and it's not going anywhere anyways. But Ballard and Steichen have to try to win 10 games to save their job. So they're going to they're looking at it and saying, look, we won 9 games each of the last 2 years with a mishmash of Anthony Richardson, Gardner Minshew, and Joe Flacco. So why can't we make the roster a little better and get to 10 or 11 wins? And the biggest issue to me is, again, not a 2-year deal, so you don't even have any upside if you're right. Like, I would way rather this deal be Daniel Jones 2 for 24. And the downside is we have to eat a little bit of dead cap in the second year. But then at least if Daniel Jones is good this year, okay, sure, you start him next year at no risk. But now we're stuck in a spot where best case scenario, we just let Daniel Jones walk. And worst case scenario, he's good. And then we end up being a loser that pays him $30 million. And then we repeat the cycle of Daniel Jones where he then becomes bad next year. So it's concerning. And it's going to be a frustrating Colts season. And if you have Anthony Richardson, it's concerning, but like they've said very loudly that they were going to bring in someone to be an open competition. So this Daniel Jones, like, okay, it would be better if the competition was Trey Lance, I guess. But like they didn't trade for Geno Smith, which they really should have. They didn't sign Sam Darnold. They didn't trade for Matthew Stafford. You know, all them like compared to where we were last year, the door is open for Anthony Richardson in a way that I'm frankly surprised that it still is for the Indianapolis Colts. And if you're a believer, feel free to keep believing. I don't think I'm going to be believing with you, but I'm going to be hoping.
Right. Well, and we see like they're going to run him into the ground. Daniel Jones gives them jobs. I don't want them to run Anthony Richardson into the ground because you're going to get 7 games.
What, you want him to pass?
Well, I mean, I don't want him to have 7 games. So that's, I mean, you're right in that we don't want him to pass, but like it's kind of
another tenor for Daniel. We'll run him into the ground too. Sam Ellinger, get ready.
That just brings in the big. It's like you want him to finish the season and play but his upside is running, but he's hurt every time he gets tackled, and also he can't hit the broadside. He couldn't hit water if he fell out of the boat type scenario. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. But it is right in that we know Daniel Jones is terrible. Like we know that he's just a bad NFL quarterback. That being said, in dynasty terms, like I'm still clicking the button. Like,
oh yeah,
I'm still going to try to send. I'm going to try to send some shitty wide receiver that somebody really likes, and try to go and grab like a Daniel Jones. Like I'm gonna try to do that to lock it up because if you know my dynasty rosters, I'm gonna need those 6 games Daniel Jones plays.
I said that Richardson was 60-40 to start week 1. I would say that Daniel Jones is 60-40 to be starting in the fantasy playoffs. So I'll have a lot of Daniel Jones on my rosters for sure.
And Buck says that's what the Colts get for that bullshit they pulled in week 17. Hold that Daniel Jones, enjoy him. Fair. That's fair.
Hey, look, our secondary is vastly improved. We're not going to get lit up by Drew Lock anymore. I'm surprised we didn't sign Drew Lock. I thought this would be one of those ones where it's like the Colts front office watched one game of Drew Lock, and it was Drew Lock eliminating them from playoff contention with like 6 touchdown passes. And so we were going to give Drew Lock $50 million to result. That would have made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean that's low key the Justin Fields to the Jets move. There is Fields always lit up Aaron Glenn's defenses for like years.
Yeah, like if you could light up my defense.
Yep. But yeah, no, I mean not a ton to add on the Daniel Jones stuff. Yeah, he like obvious cheap kind of mobile-ish quarterback. I think Jones is like 7th in rushing yards per game over the last 3 seasons on that same list as Fields. So yeah, give me that in fantasy. From like a real life perspective, this is like what you get when everyone in an organization is walking in assuming that this is like their final year. Like there is
why you don't do that. Maybe it's bad. Like if you look at the teams that make dumb decisions, maybe it's bad to have your coach and GM on a playoffs or else ultimatum. Like maybe they're not looking out for the long-term interests of the franchise.
Yeah, and it's not just that like they don't go out to make like a different opportunity, a different signing and like not eat that opportunity cost. It's also like in how you structure the contract, right? So like there's been some talk about like why is there so much guaranteed? It's because for this regime, it almost doesn't matter whether it's guaranteed or incentives. If it's a likely to be earned incentive, which it probably will be because Jones started like 10 games last year or whatever, if you give him like an 8-game starting incentive, it's likely to be earned. It counts against the cap. until he doesn't earn it, and then you get it a credit for the cap against the next year, right? Which doesn't matter to this regime. So yeah, again, it's kind of irrelevant whether it's incentives or not, at least for anyone in the building right now. So yeah, that's all I had to add there. Yeah, Godspeed. Good luck, Jacob.
I mean, here's the nice thing. Like, if I just try to zoom in, I always talk about you want to zoom out. If I have to try to zoom in, I just have to pretend like I don't care about Super Bowls or about like long-term aspirations. And I just put myself in the mindset of like, I just want to go 10-7, baby. That's all I want. Like, I will appreciate that they now get to run the same style of offense regardless of who's a quarterback. Like, that was one thing that really bothered me last year. It was like, of all of the backups to keep flopping back and forth between, Joe Flacco was just an absurd choice, because it was like every week we would go from, we're running the wing T like service academy offense with Anthony Richardson, to like, we're putting out the oldest, slowest quarterback in the NFL to like drop back and throw 3-yard like hitches. It's like, it was so incomprehensible. I guess bad news, there's no Joe Flacco ripcord for Josh Downs and Michael Pittman and co this year.
Yeah.
So you can just look to 2026 for Colts wide receivers outside of best ball formats, because they're gonna throw. I would be pretty surprised if the Colts are higher than like 30th in pass rate this year.
Yeah,
so that's
big Jonathan Taylor year. Big Jonathan.
I think they're gonna add a running back earlier than people think.
That's what I said.
Jonathan Taylor is gonna still have a very good season.
I said that on the Dynasty Points Marker report, that the Colts are one of my favorite, like every year. And in the NFL draft, a running back gets drafted somewhere nobody wants. Colts are destination number one to me. Yeah, they're not walking out Trey Sermon again if JT goes down. There's no way.
They're one of those spots where, like, they need an actual backup. Like, they didn't have one last year, and it really hurt them when Jonathan Taylor was out / hobbled. And then they also don't really have anyone for the third down role. So if they could find a running back who, fits that third down role and actually can have a little bit of juice, be a backup, and then fill that same spot, they would be a team where it would not surprise me at all if they had like a round 3 running back. It's not like a round 1 running back or anything crazy, but round 2 through 4, look for the Colts to add a running back. I would suspect like a Damian Martinez, Cam Scatterbo, someone in that world.
Neil, there's a couple options.
Yeah, I've seen Giddens in the chat. That's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Or it's going to be like someone's fantasy favorite, like Tootin. It's going to find his way in Indy, and we're going to cry many tears. It's good. Like I can just see that being like a fantasy kryptonite type move that we're all very sad about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've talked about Aaron Rodgers enough. I think Russ is better suited for the Toronto Argonauts. Like, I don't want to see him anymore in the NFL. I'm done. He's on here. Do you have like a prediction? Does he have a chance? Is he going to play? Is he going to be the veteran backup? Like, would he take that situation? I don't know. I think he's done. I think he's almost droppable.
Who are we talking about? Russ?
Russell Wilson.
It seems like him and Rodgers are going to go to the Steelers and the Giants, and they're just, Rodgers gets to pick first, and then Russ gets whatever's left. That seems to be what's happening.
God, I can't imagine walking into a season with Russell Wilson and being like, we got it. I think whoever takes Russ has a better chance of taking a quarterback. Does that make sense?
For sure, because he's going to command less money. And I mean, how it's going to be it's like got to be so humiliating, especially for Steelers with Russ, because like he started for them all last year, leads them to the playoffs. And then they're telling every reporter who will listen, like, we don't really like this Russ guy. Like, we'd rather keep Fields. We're kind of into Rodgers. We might give Darnold a call. And then it's
anyone but him again.
Then it's like, oh, it's like you go to the dance, with like this kind of ugly guy, and then all of a sudden, and it's like you start seeing hot guys all over the place. Trevor, like Tom, Ryan, Steve, Jimbo, and then it's like all of them leave, and you're like, Russell, can I have this dance? And it's like he really wants to say no because he's just been like publicly humiliated while he's sitting on the bleachers crying all night. But like he doesn't have any other choice. No one else wants to dance with him. So it's either he just goes home with his dick in his hand, or he just sucks it up and dances with you and tries to pretend that you love them all along. And that's what he's going to do. And so, they're going to slow dance their way to 8 wins this year, whichever team ends up dancing with Russ.
I don't know if they'll get that if he ends up in New York. I mean, he barely pulled that in Pittsburgh with a much better team. Baltimore, as a Baltimore faithful, we'll be sad to see Russ go, frankly, but is what it is. Yeah, in terms of the Russ for Dynasty, I think it's pretty over. We can move. Yeah, we can move. Let's go to weapons and new places. When we come back, we will talk fantasy relevant players, either in new places or getting re-signed. It was a big day if you were a position player, or I should say a skill player, quote unquote. We'll be right back. Okay. There are weapons in new places. We have got re-signings, just a lot of moves. Hard to just sit there and point out a ton. We're going to talk best and worst fits, biggest dynasty movers for us. I think I highlighted 3 of my favorites here. Obviously, Devontae Adams with the Rams. We talked about him earlier. 2-year, $46 million, $26 million guaranteed. Wide receiver 42, round 10, pick 116. We're talking about a guy who clearly showed he had the juice at the end of last year. You're getting a bigger discount on him this year than we got last year, which was kind of odd to me. Godwin, 3 years, $66 million, $45 million guaranteed. We're going to talk about that. Wide receiver 36, round 9 pick 98. Najee Harris going to the Chargers. A little disappointed in the contract. 1 year, 5.25 guaranteed. Another 4 in incentives. RB 28, round 11, pick 128. I think those 3 might be 3 of my favorites. Obviously, big Devontae guy. I wrote about him last year. I'm all in on him again. I want to kick this off with Chris Godwin because I was very out on Chris Godwin due to his injury. It was disgusting, right? The ankle, like your leg's not supposed to be in the opposite direction like that. The beauty about Chris Godwin re-signing is that the team that re-signed him was the closest to him. Like they knew about the injury, the recovery. They had the best look at the long-term effects, and they decided to give him a pretty significant amount of guaranteed money. I'm all the way back in. Yes, the system is different. Baker loves him. He's going to get a ton of targets. I almost guarantee they're playing him inside. All in on the Bucs offense again. He's a big buy for me. And I think at his price there, you're getting a steal. You're getting a bargain. And I think you're getting a bargain with him for most of the offseason, especially when the rookies kick in. I'm all about this Godwin. He's my favorite signing. He's saving a ton of dynasty rosters for me with this. And then Adams, I think, is perfect. So those 2 were my absolute favorites. So let's talk about who are the best and worst fits before we get into the biggest dynasty movers. I'll start with you, Jacob.
Yeah, I agree with both of those. These will be lower key. I think you kind of took the headline grabbers. One that I really love is the fit for Christian Kirk. People, I think, kind of forget, but Stephon Diggs was quite a functional fantasy wide receiver 2 for the first half of the year before his injury last year. Nico Collins obviously is an all-world, all 3-level wide receiver, particularly in the intermediate and deep areas of the field. He's going to require all sorts of defensive attention at all times. And then the Houston Texans have decided to take an interesting approach this offseason, which is that they've rejected offensive line play as a concept. So they don't want to block anybody. I think it's potentially some sort of Trump protest. They're adopting an open border approach to their offense. And so the woke Houston Texans will have no choice but to check it down to Christian Kirk on hinge routes repeatedly. So I expect a lot of 11 target, 9 catch, 65-yard type of days for Christian Kirk. A nice, reliable, consistent, probably high-end wide receiver 3 season from him. Tank Dell, by the way, for people that aren't following the Tank Dell news, it's like quite unfortunate, but because of all of the additional ligament damage, he got his ACL repair surgery like 2 weeks ago. So he's not going to play at all in 2025. He'll hopefully be back in 2026. I mean, who knows what to make of his career, but like, don't factor him into anything you think about the Houston Texans in 2025. At absolute most, he's going to play like 3 or 4 games. So it's Collins, it's Kirk, and it's currently nobody else. And I really want them to draft only immigration and customs enforcement with all 7 of their draft picks. So hopefully, I'm really excited about Christian Kirk as a pretty cheap dynasty ad. Like, he's the kind of guy you might be able to get for a late 2, early 3, who I think you could just slot into your lineup every week.
We talked about Christian Kirk on the market report extensively. I think a couple weeks ago where he was a priority buy, and then again last week after the move, and I couldn't be more excited. Again, you can just go into my flex spot pretty much every week. Ryan?
Yeah, no, I'm with you guys on Kirk 100%. Like, this is an offense that at the end of the year was relying on like John Mechie to get like a 20% plus target shares. They just kind of had nobody to throw to. Yeah, I mean, Kirk is going to step right in here. I would compare the offensive line situation to like the Miami Dolphins this past season, where Mike McDaniel just said, you know what? We actually can't block anybody. So not only are we not going to run the ball, we're just going to, we are going to use the short passing game as our run game. We're going to throw 15 million screens to Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith. So that can very easily be Christian Kirk just soaking up all that low ADOT goodness. I won't go so far as to say that Nico Collins is like on the Tyreek Hill path or whatever, but I would really be thinking about this, that there's probably not going to be a lot of like downfield developing routes with the Texans with this personnel as it stands right now. So yeah, very into Kirk. I guess the only other kind of guy that I feel like I can say is at least sort of an exciting fit for fantasy is Najee Harris on the Chargers. So let's talk Najee, guys. Najee is not as bad as people think he is. People seem to have this belief that Najee is like the least efficient running back in the league. That has really never been true. It was kind of true for like 8 weeks in 2023 when he was playing hurt. But in terms of all the advanced stats, all the nerdy stuff, the missed tackles forced, the yards after contact, he has largely been a bit above league average for most of his career. And we have seen Najee never miss a single game in his entire NFL career. So I think this is legitimate. I think that the Chargers want to give Najee Harris a bunch of touches. Do I think that's going to stop them from drafting a running back on day 2? No, I do not think it's going to stop them from doing that. Do I think it's going to stop them from drafting Omarion Hampton in round 1? Probably. I'd be pretty surprised to see they're at 20 overall, I believe. Would be pretty surprised if that picks a running back now. But yeah, like we can be easily rolling into August and say, wow, Najee Harris is going to get 300 touches this year. Like that is in the range of outcomes now. I would love, if you have trades from today, Thomas, I would love to hear some of them. I do. Normally I would say, like running back signed in the best running back landing spot, like clearly you should have bought earlier. I really think that like the malaise around people's opinions of Najee Harris might make this continue to be a value like deep into the summer and into the rest of the offseason.
I think it'll be a better value in the summer even than it is right now, because I think that they're going to add a significant running back investment in the draft. The Najee thing was interesting because my first reaction was like, oh my God, like classic boomer Chargers. And I thought, like, especially after seeing, very different player, but like Barkley kind of resets the running back market completely. And then we see Aaron Jones got like a surprisingly big contract where he gets 2 for 20 with 13 million guaranteed. So some of that even includes dead cap if they cut him after this year. And so then I see the Najee Harris contract, and I'm bracing myself for like 2 years, 25 million, 15 guaranteed, something in that range. And then it comes out that it's 1 year, 5.25 with up to another 4 in incentives. That's honestly like a much lower contract than I thought Najee Harris was going to get, and I would say is like a totally fine amount of money to pay Najee Harris. But that does tell me like I don't think that they're going to go into this year with Najee on a 1 year and a day 3 back and Kamani Vidal and Hassan Haskins. That seems unlikely. So I bet that they draft someone in round 3 or round 4. I know how this community feels about rookie running backs. I know how this community feels about Najee Harris. So I get the feeling that everyone is going to be really excited to make the not Najee Harris bet in that backfield, provided there's one available to them. And so I'm fine buying today, but I bet you he'll be just as good of a buy, if not even cheaper, in July or August when people are drafting his 92nd overall pick back up ahead of him.
Well, I mean, just look what happened to Vidal, the fake Twitter player that everyone fell in love with the minute he went there. Doesn't change much, right? Like, we saw what happened when Dobbins was out of the lineup there. That's when their pass rate over expected finally got to where fantasy managers like wanted it. And I think you could clearly tell the Chargers didn't want to play that way. So I don't think it takes him out of running back round 1 conversation. I don't think it takes him out of running back round 2 conversation at all. I think Najee is just an insurance policy. I think that they're going to be happy with these 1-year deals for their kind of supplemental running back moving forward after this year. Like, they released Gus, who was clearly dusted.
Yeah.
But Dobbins was great there. They got the great value. I think he signed for less than $2 million last year. Najee just kind of feels like that deal again. I think they're looking for answers come the draft. So I don't think it takes them out of Hampton. I don't think it, because again, these running backs, I doubt they're getting drafted to be in workhorse situations. Like, there's just so few of those spots available. A 1-year deal for a back, and we know the NFL just loves flatline 1,000-yard rushers. Like, the NFL views that as a massive milestone. So I truly think they still go running back very early, and this Najee thing is definitely a split, but I think that can work in the Greg Roman offense that we're once again going to be cursing for being a negative pass rate over expected type team. I agree with you that he's going to end up being a buy. I mean, he still is kind of a buy. Ryan, you wanted some trades? I got some for you. 208 and the 311 or Najee Harris?
Najee.
Okay. I can vibe with that. We got Najee Harris straight up for the 210.
Najee.
Right. So obviously that means we're going to say like Najee the 212. Right. We're obviously going to go Najee for doing that, but like
This is like this,
he was even cheaper. He was even
yeah. I feel
I was going to say he was even cheaper here for a bit.
6 months ago.
Just 5 days ago, you could get him for Dontavian Wicks, and you get a free Fantasy Points data favorite Josh Palmer on top.
Crazy. Let's not be crazy. We're only 2 years away from free agency with Dontavian Wicks.
I've had enough.
We're going to be getting 3 for 36 from the Bills.
Is he getting hands? That like is someone gifting him hands
Yeah,
in free agency?
The ESPN stuff. Someone went around where it was like he had an 84th percentile open score, and then or it might have actually been higher. It might have been his score was 84, and it was maybe even higher percentile, but it was very high. And then his catch score was like just literally 0. It wasn't even like 0th percentile, it's just literally a score of 0, which was like, yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, that feels earned.
So if you can, I mean, from today, Najee and Brian Robinson or Christian McCaffrey.
Oh my God. I mean, Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah. So it's some people are using this to like vault Najee Harris off their roster for a perceived upgrade. Well, that was an obvious upgrade, but his price is kind of all over the place. It is going up, but I think Jacob, you nailed it. When they draft that running back, he's definitely going to go back up in price.
By the way, this applies to, this is a great running back class. So I'm not going to say that like the rate is going to be totally the same as what it's been, but a lot of people are talking about, these third-round running backs and how terrifying it's going to be. Anyone on day 2, what we've seen in recent years as a trend is that running backs who don't do much early, you don't really give up on them because teams tend to still give them work in year 2. But this is specifically third-round running backs since 2020. Zach Moss, Darrington Evans, Keyshawn Vaughn, Trey Sermon, Brian Robinson Jr., Tyrion Davis-Price, Rashad White, Devon Achane, Ty J. Spears, Kendre Miller, Tank Bigsby, Blake Corum, Trey Benson. Like, the only dude who actually was featured as like a lead running back in their rookie year from jump is Brian Robinson, who was in the timeshare with Antonio Gibson. And then eventually Devon Achane, who was famously healthy scratched week 1 of his rookie season. And a lot of these guys became like literally nothing ever. And a lot of the guys that even became good didn't really do all that much in their rookie year. So as far as I'm concerned, if you want to take a shot on round 3, round 4 running backs in redraft, I'm not saying don't do that for their sake. But what I will say, this goes for Jaylen Warren as well, who we talked about in a glancing fashion. Like, if you believe in someone's talent and they draft a round 3, round 4 running back in this class, like, bet on the guy whose talent you believe in, because they're going to start as the incumbent. These guys do not come in day 1 and start as round 3 rookies. It just doesn't happen. So if you were a believer in Jaylen Warren, or if you're a believer in Najee Harris or Chase Brown, or whichever one of these guys ends up getting a round 3 dance partner, like, bet on the guy that you believe in to hold them off. Just pick your spots, because some of these guys I think do emerge over the course of the year. But absolutely, I think don't be living in fear of round 3 running backs.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. One player not talked about a lot so far in terms of fits, whether it being good or bad, is De'Ami Brown on the Jaguars. I actually kind of like as kind of a flyer. I don't know what the Jaguars are going to do
right now. What are we talking about? Are you Josh Palmer?
Why did they just spend
No.
an extra $5 million and just keep Christian Kirk?
Well, that I'm not sure, but I like him as a flyer. I think he should be a flyer.
Sure.
Like, why wouldn't you in this offense? Like, I'm sorry, but I know Gabe Davis's ass. I don't need, and not the metric. I don't need any like help in understanding that he is ass. If we love the offensive coordinator, and I think Parker Washington is ass, in terms of as free as a flyer as you could get, and there's a reason I said flyer, he's worth rostering. Like, he's in a spot to succeed.
But like, why do the Jaguars always, like, no team spends more time just fucking wasting money on these $10 million wide receivers than the Jaguars? They do it every year. It is like, this is just a no-fly zone to me. Like, I don't understand what the point. This isn't, I get the fantasy take, but like, what are we doing with these, like, De'Ami Brown? Like, he's not really that materially different than a veteran minimum contract wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just don't bother with these contracts. And they do it constantly. Like, they did Chris Conley, they did Marvin Jones, they did Zay Jones, they did Gabe Davis. Now it's De'Ami Brown. Like,
hey,
enough already with these like $10 million wide receiver threes on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm tired of it. What were you saying, Ryan?
It's a new regime too. Their GM looks younger than me and Jacob, and he's still handing out contracts to De'Ami Brown. I don't understand.
Yeah, because he drafted De'Ami Brown at the 207 in a bunch of dynasty drafts, just like I did. He's getting even.
That's got to be exactly what it is. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. It's like if I became a GM in 3 years, I would be like signing Dontavian Wicks, and I'd be signing like De'Ami Brown, and I'd be signing Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, I'd be like, Zach Evans, like, come get a camp tryout.
Well, this clearly came from his.
Are you still playing football?
The De'Ami Brown stuff clearly came from the playoff run, because De'Ami Brown was really good in the last 2 playoff games, right? 19% target share plus 28% targets per route run, like 4.07 yards per route run. He obviously showed up when everyone was watching. So to them to give, like, remember the 10 million, that's like a 2024 equivalent of like what, 7.5, sticks it is like because the cap percentage or the percentage of the cap. So not looking at just the sticker price. He's free in every single draft. So if we love the head coach who's calling the plays and people still exactly, and people still love Trevor Lawrence, that, you know, there's people out there still citing that his draft capital in tweets about him, as if that matters now in like year 5. But Jacob, we know
he's former first overall pick Trevor Lawrence now. Damn, that's
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You know, as soon as guys are being referred to as former first round picks, it's over.
Yep. He's still got the draft capital. But we love everything about it. Obviously, I love Brenton Strange, but we don't know how it's going to work because when Mike Evans came back, Cade Otton was completely phased out of the offense. So is Strange actually going to be part of the? I don't know. They need pass catchers. I think Parker Washington sucks, right? I know Gabe Davis sucks. So it's like
they all suck.
They might draft somebody.
And the running backs don't catch any passes, so it's going to be
right. That's why
he kind of sort of does, but not really. And Tank doesn't at all. So it's
he got
I don't know what the Jags are doing.
$10 million guaranteed for Dion.
I supported the Evan Ingram cut because I think that's addition by subtraction. But I don't understand, like when they cut both Kirk and Ingram, I had penciled in Chris Godwin onto this roster. I was like, they just cut both of their intermediate players. It's Godwin's old OC. Like they're gonna drop the bag for Godwin. Which I think they probably must have tried, but now it's weird. Like it's Brian Thomas and yeah, like Parker Washington, De'Ami Brown, Gabe Davis.
No, they could draft somebody, and then everything I just talked about doesn't mean anything. But like through the course of a season, you could find him in your flex spots. Like Zay Jones. Zay Jones was usable. Right? What's that?
Every league, Brenton Strange.
Yeah, I've been
going to be like he's going to be like our mascot this year. This program.
As the one who got eye rolled when I mentioned Brenton Strange on this podcast last year, I feel really good about how much
he's going to hit. He's going to be like the tight end 11.
Well, I said my favorite flyer right now is Brenton Strange, and I remember Jacob like visibly went,
"Oh yeah,"
and I went, "Just wait." And here we are.
You're actually having right now. You've got to talk about De'Ami Brown.
Hey, I just that means we're doing pretty good.
Clipception from this, where 6 months from now it'll be De'Ami Brown. Thomas, I remember I got eye rolls from De'Ami Brown.
Yeah,
we're just constantly rolling these Jaguars.
Brian Thomas is gonna have like a high ankle sprain by week 3, and Trevor Lawrence is gonna be throwing a group of De'Ami Brown, Parker Washington, Gabe Davis, and Brenton Strange, and like I'm just gonna be like Tom and Baratheon, just like walk out the window to my death.
Don't worry, it'll give every Trevor Lawrence truther another year of ammo to say it wasn't his fault when he overthrew everybody.
What's the Theo Ash? Not his fault.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. But just in terms of fit, I think that one was really good. And then one we haven't touched on yet is Javonte Williams. Now, I think Javonte Williams might be dead. Like I think he's terrible. He's absolutely awful. But Jacob, you've talked a lot about how the Cowboys, everyone's, that means round 1 running back incoming. You've talked about at great length how they just haven't valued the position. I think Zeke has just burned an image of them caring about that position into everyone's brain still. It's possible he doesn't even get out of training camp with the Cowboys because he's been so bad. But there's also a small chance for this fit that we get another 45 receptions out of him, because one thing he can do is pass pro and catch the ball.
And 200 carries for 690 yards.
Exactly. Basically, Zeke's like last semi-productive season.
He's basically Zeke.
Right. So I think in terms of flyers, again, he's going to be a very late round. His ADP is not that high. RB 42 in the 15th round. This is like a clear any RB on the 53.
He's going to be an interesting.
Are you ready to relive the Rico Dowdle wars of 2024, Jacob?
I hope so. I mean, the only unfortunate thing is that Javonte is not going to be as cheap as Rico Dowdle was, because Javonte has a brand name.
I
Part of
think
the
it
fun
might be
part of-
negative for him. I think people think Javonte is worse than Rico Dowdle. I think people
well,
think Javonte
he is. But like,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's never good, but like the reporting on this was that they signed Javonte because Rico asked for too much money. So it wasn't like they chose Javonte. Anyway, but it was, yeah, I mean, Herms is bringing up examples, and that's probably where this goes. Like, this is probably Rashad Penny on the Eagles, Ronald Jones on the Chiefs. Like one of those spots where he gets drafted all year, and then August, it's like, oh, I'm just praying he makes the roster. But I don't know. Like, I think Javante's probably completely cooked. There's still like a flicker inside of me that can't fully let go. The prospect in the rookie year and the talent that once resided within him. I think it's gone after last year. Like, I don't know if it's ever coming back. At the very least, though, he can catch the ball, he can pass protect. And the Cowboys do have like big time, just like divorced dad energy with running back position. Like they went all in on Zeke. They didn't even get a prenup. And now like they were left with nothing. They're paying alimony. They lost their house and they're sitting in like a broken down loft, just like sucking back Miller High Lifes, talking about, you know, the good old days, contemplating their trip to Turkey for a hair transplant, and, you know, telling their son never to get attached to a woman because it always ends in pain. And so maybe they're willing to walk down the aisle again with an Ashton Genty or an O'Marion Hampton. I'm certainly not going to rule it out. I just think there's a slightly higher chance than everyone else thinks that we wind up back in May and we go, oh my God, the Cowboys didn't take a running back until round 5. And their running back room is like Deuce Vaughn, I don't know, Deuce Vaughn, Ollie Gordon, and Javonte Williams. And it's like, well, someone has to get 11 points per game here. And like, maybe that's Javonte. So I think his range of outcomes is somewhere between cut in August and 225 carries.
Yeah, exactly. But again, it's just one of those things where we get into like week 12 and you've got multiple bye weeks and half your team is dead. That's just the type of player you play and hope to get like 7 or 8 points. That to me is probably where you're at with Javonte, but it's a chance. You know, it's best case because again, like you've mentioned before, the team doesn't value the running back position. So there's like a legit chance he's not an absolute 0, but he's probably a 0.
Probably a 0.
Probably a 0. Who else do we like for biggest movers? I know we talked about
Got nothing else.
I know we talked about like Devontae Adams and Godwin and some of these guys. However, one player we haven't talked about a lot, mostly because he hasn't actually signed yet, but it's Evan Ingram.
Yeah.
Evan Ingram is somebody who's visiting the Chargers was that today? And then he visited the Broncos, I think yesterday or the day before. That's probably your best case landing spots, but it's possible he gets into a fantasy friendly spot. But in terms of like Evan Ingram, the asset, what do we do? Are you just holding in hopes? Because his best case scenario he's out of. Doug Peterson was the best case scenario for Evan Ingram.
Well, we'll talk about tight ends a lot next week with Max on the show, but Evan Ingram is not a great fit for today's league. You know, one of the reasons I think why Jacksonville's offense was not very good is that they ran a substantial amount of it through Evan Ingram. They played him a ton in 11 personnel on early downs, similar to what Seattle did with Fant, where you're playing effectively a non-blocker as an inline tight end on early downs, and then wondering in a press conference every week why you can't run the ball. And that's why you can't run the ball, because you're trying to block defensive ends with Evan fucking Ingram. And I don't think that it's very likely that a new team is going to use him that way. I think they're going to use him as a situational piece, a joker, if you will, a matchup piece that plays on 3rd and longs and 11 and swaps on and off with a slot wide receiver on 1st and 2nd down. I think the spots that are being mentioned are interesting. Chargers, he's visiting with the Chargers. That could be a lot of fun. We saw Will Dissly just get like hyper targeted by Justin Herbert. They don't have a lot else on the roster, and they'll be an efficient passing game. So I could see Evan Ingram making the most of his opportunities there. And then with the Broncos, where Sean Payton, they rotate everybody like crazy, and his tight ends outside of prime Jimmy Graham tend to top out at 60, 70% route rates. But we've seen that work for him. We've seen Kobe Fleener, Jared Cook, guys like that actually have Benjamin Watson that play this move tight end role, and they don't get every route. But when they're on the field, they get targeted at a really high rate, and they're used in a really smart way. I would love to see him with the Denver Broncos. I think that's his best spot.
I agree.
Yeah, I 100% with you. I think you're holding and hoping he signs in one of those places pretty much. Yeah, I don't think there's much point to like pre-rolling the Evan Ingram signing. Like you just have to assume it's hopefully in one of those very few spots that make sense. I'm with you on the dream is that he is Sean Payton's Joker. And maybe he doesn't lie about it this time. He's only pulled that football out from us like the last 4 or 5 times in a row. So surely this is the time. Surely it's not like Ingram 2 years, $15 million to the Broncos, and then they draft Loveland in round 1. That would be quite something. And I don't even think that's that far out of the realm of possibility. But yeah, I think you're waiting till he gets signed. Maybe he's a guy that doesn't sign until after the draft, though, honestly, with this tight end class that at least I think the NFL sees it as very deep. I see it as a bit less deep after those top 2 guys, but I do think that's the perception right now. So yeah, wouldn't be super shocked if we're having to wait until May to find out the Evan Ingram landing spot.
So as I sit here and listen to both of you very smart humans speak on this topic, it is just kind of reaffirmed I want out no matter what. So if this is the opportunity to take the news of him potentially talking or signing with the 2 best case outcomes for him, I want out. I want out probably even before he signs. And looking at some of the recent trades, even from a few days, because it's been a while now since he was released. Like it wasn't yesterday's news. We've got a couple of days. Brian Robinson seems to be like a pretty close 1-for-1. We've got a couple like 211 and Michael Mayer. I'm happy to just get Evan Ingram off my roster for that. Theo Johnson.
The Michael Mayer trade. I need the Michael Mayer trade in my life.
I agree. I need it so bad. We got Theo Johnson, Jake Ferguson in the 403. I would just take that. Like I want out at this point. We're talking about a guy who can maybe hopefully be a swing type tight end in a league where you could just like, that's like Tyler Conklin levels of like tight end. He's just lost all dynasty value. I'm out. And I don't think I even want to be in if he signs somewhere. That's good. I just think there's other options now at tight end. I asked about Evan Ingram because we get asked actually quite a bit about Evan Ingram through DMs and Discord chat. So I wanted to talk about him kind of before, and then you guys are going to talk tight ends next week. So hopefully maybe he signs by then. That being said, let's take our last break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some quiet winners and losers. And I actually think one of them, it's not so quiet. I think it's pretty glaring, pretty obvious. Sit tight. We'll be right back. Okay, in terms of quiet winners and losers, who got it wrong, who got it right, and we're going to end us on some final dynasty thoughts. I can't think of a team that's gotten this whole thing wrong more than the Houston Texans. Like we talked about it kind of before, but I kind of want to just expand on this in a more serious note here. I don't know, Ryan, you and I talked about it quite a bit in the DMs, and I totally understand the point of like their offensive line wasn't working last year. Why would it work now with these guys? So they got rid of them. I just don't see why moving your best offensive lineman. Granted, I think they got like a decent pick haul back. Like the total return, it was like,
did they?
Okay,
2 or 3 or 4, right?
But
With
Yeah,
the-
like I think that's
one of
like
the 30 or
okay.
40 most valuable players in the NFL. Like I know he's 30, but like
Well, Brett Whitefield hated all of his tape. Like he thinks he's kind of lost it, but I'm not a tape guru.
I mean, I'm not gonna act like I'm watching left tackle tape, so all I can go off of is like, PFF grades, history and track record, and like people's opinions. So like I'm sure there's opinions that vary, but I don't think it's like a hot take that Laramie Tunsil is one of the highest valued left tackles in the
Right.
game.
So then you get that. They've moved other starters as well. This is not the draft to like reset your tackles.
No.
Pretty much every tackle I've seen, they're all guards. I think on one of the last first read episodes, Brett Whitefield had like the top guard or top tackle moving to center before the Bears like signed a center. Like, sure he was more kidding than not, but like, it's not. It's not a draft for that.
Patriots are going to draft a tackle at 4 potentially, who probably isn't a tackle.
Yeah.
And the other option is Membu, who is probably at least a right tackle. Like, is there a single left? I don't think there's a single first-round left tackle in this draft potentially.
And the free agency market dried up so fast. Like Ronnie Stanley, I think would have fetched at least $5 million more per year, if not
just
$7.
Soft shell crab, like
he must. I just think I think Stanley
Dan Moore got. Like he must have given up like $40 to $50 million to stay in Baltimore.
I think he just loves playing with Lamar Jackson. I think he's just one of those guys that just loves the franchise.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard not to love a team that wins often, and I think that's part of it too. And they stuck with him through injury.
Giving him like 4 years, $130 million.
Oh yeah, he left money on the table. But like the market dried up so fast. Like Moses was a really good option, but he was approaching mid-30s. It's like the free agent market wasn't exactly robust. And then this is not the class to do this. And yes, they went out and got a very cheap Christian Kirk, which is very good to fill that role. But they've got an aging running back. Like granted, Mixon was very good last year, but they've got money invested in that. I feel like they're going the other way. And now they have a first-year play caller again. I think they looked at what happened with CJ Stroud in year 2. Right? CJ Stroud goes out there and has that blistering rookie year. And then they go in year 2, they're like, you know what we got to do? We got to go get Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon and really help CJ Stroud out. And then they're like, I hope you know how to swim, CJ. Don't worry, we're going to teach you. And then it didn't work. And then for lessons this year, they just threw him out in the middle of the lake, like my dad did, and said, figure it out. Because this dude is going to be left out on an island to drown. What is he going to do? How does he save himself? He's going to tread water back there? I don't know. Like it's brutal, man.
Not his fault. He's going to be the new not his fault guy.
He might end up in like a David Carr level sack territory. Like it's like 2025's Robo Sack might be CJ Stroud.
It's certainly a choice.
They've done him dirty.
They always say offensive line is a weak link position. And so maybe they looked at it and they were like, look, if you're only as good as your weakest link, let's get rid of the other 4.
Yeah.
I don't know. But like,
it makes no sense.
It was very weird. Their offensive line was completely broken last year. They couldn't handle a stunt. And then this year they got rid of 3 of last year's starters. So I don't know. I mean, to be clear, it's really just the Tunsil thing. Like Brett Jones, who I'm going to take a wild guess as a Texans fan, is raising the point in the chat of, look, last year's offensive line was horrible. Why would they not overhaul it? I'm not saying they shouldn't have changed the offensive line. And Green and Mason are bad. They're huge reasons why the offensive line was bad. I'm very unconvinced that Laramie Tunsil is not a good player. Now, there's people that are close to the Texans organization, like Lance Zierlein, saying it was a culture issue and that he was checked out and that, they didn't want to pay him. Okay, maybe. I can't speak to that, but I don't think that Laramie Tunsil is the predominant reason why their offensive line was bad last year. And then, they got rid of 2 guards who were playing badly. but they haven't replaced them yet in a meaningful way. Like, it's not like they went out and signed Will Fries. So they've essentially just shedded bad starters and replaced them with who knows. So we'll see what they do in the draft. I expect and hope that they will address the offensive line considerably, but like, I don't know how many offensive linemen that you take in a draft can you realistically start and expect good play from? Not a lot, especially at the tackle positions. The plan is apparently to play Titus Howard at left tackle. I don't think that's going to go very well. We'll see.
No, and I guess their saving grace is what division they're in, maybe, because it's just not a strong division.
7-10.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe this has got to be just, in my opinion, you look at what we're going to talk about them, but look at what the Bears have done. The Bears went, oh, that's a weakness. We're going to attack it. Granted, now, guys, again, our guy Brett Whitefield, they overpaid a little bit for some of these spots, and that's
coupons.
That's the point I'm getting at, is they like saw the weakness and they're attacking it to help their franchise quarterback. And the Houston Texans seem to be taking the opposite approach. Washington went, look, we had a great year. How can we help our young franchise quarterback? And they're like, let's get him a reliable veteran. He might be fat, but we think we could use him in Debo. Oh, by the way, you're going to give us Tunsil? Yeah, let's
Debo's always
tack
good
on.
in odd years. It's just years.
We're going to bolster our left side and protect Daniels with Tunsil. That's great. Veteran option like Zach Ertz. All right, he's just Cliff Kingsbury's guy. He's coming back. Forget you, Ben Sinnott. You're playing fullback. They're just helping. These guys. Houston is taking a backwards approach. I don't know. To me, it was an absolute failure in I gave them credit for the Christian Kirk deal. This year's been a huge failure so far. Granted, there's other guys that can be signed. There's other free agents out there. To me, offensive line is like the hardest spot to go from like worst to first with in terms of free agent signings and rookie picks, because there's so many factors that go into it.
Patriots fixed it with Morgan Moses.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Sorry, Drake. Nothing but gruel this year, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to talk about I'm sure we're talking about the Patriots in this regard here right away, but to me, this is just third year of Stroud. It's going to be ugly again for sure. And as for Nico, those deep routes that he's running, like Nico is a goat. Like I think he's situation proof to a point, but like, man, there's going to be a lot left on the table with Nico this year.
Yeah, they're going to have to find different ways to get him involved. I mean, the nice thing with Nico is he is really good after the catch as well. They found ways to get him involved on like bubble screens. I mean, that was one of the things they did in that Chargers wildcard game that they won, was they wound up just forcing him the ball closer and closer to the line of scrimmage, which hopefully they'll have success with. But it's we'll see. It's not a good situation right now for sure. Patriots, another loser in my opinion. Maybe like
we signed
like
a guy
Brian wants to make the argument.
Man. Like, what are we? Right? We signed the guy that doesn't wear shoes. That's like our big.
That's your receiver.
That's our wide receiver. We went and got.
They really love Javon Baker.
It was, like, I'll give it to the Patriots. Like, at least they spent money. It's just all on the defensive side of the ball, and it's a tough sell for me, even in real life, where like this team is coming into this offseason. This team is basically an expansion team. Like, I went through their 21 through 24 drafts just as an example in the piece I wrote about value salary cap.
Why?
Because I was talking about like why there's no opportunity cost to overpaying certain guys in free agency for your team in a certain situation. And New England to me was the most extreme. So that's the team that I chose. And like 2021, the only extensions were Ramondre Stevenson and Christian Barmore. Barmore, unfortunately, might never play football again. And Stevenson is like a mid running back who I think if you gave the front office truth serum would say they wish they didn't extend. There's no one, I don't think, that is going to get an extension from the 2022 class. It looks like it was a complete airball on all fronts. That was the Cole Strange, Tyquan Thornton draft class. And then like 2023, okay, it seems like they hit on their first 2 picks. In 2024, they hit on May, and I don't know about anybody else. So like, if you factor in 5th-year options, essentially they're in a spot where Christian Gonzalez won't actually be playing on his second contract until 2028. And Drake May won't actually be playing on his second contract until 2029, if you consider their 5th-year options as an extension of the rookie contract. So from now until 2027, it's quite likely that the only players who will be playing on a second contract that the New England Patriots drafted will be Ramondre Stevenson, and then in 2027, Keon White, their second-round pick in 2023.
That's so disgusting.
With that level of nothingness, like, you can just pay anybody basically whatever on a 3-year term or less, and it's almost irrelevant because the only opportunity cost is relative to other free agents. There's no impending extensions. There's nothing. It's just a barren wasteland of sadness. So, like, yeah, I think they should have given a second-round pick and, like, however much money DK Metcalf required to want to live in cold weather. Like, if they had given DK Metcalf 3 years, $45 million per year, like, who gives a fuck if he's overpaid? Because the opportunity cost is nothing. Like, if they had given Chris, it sounded like they did give Chris Godwin like an absolutely insane offer. He just said no thanks anyways. But they're gonna have to figure out something because, yeah, the defense, okay, cool. You got Milton Williams, you got Carlton Davis, like, those are fine signings, but they got to realize, like, they are so far away from contention that building up the defense is, like, okay, but the first priority, if you could only pick one, has to be giving your quarterback, like, some semblance of a chance to just experience a realistic offense. But, like, go through everyone on their offense. Your left tackle, I have no idea what's going to be. Vidarian Lowe, I guess, is technically the starter right now. He'd be the worst starter in the NFL. Their left guard, I suppose, is Cole Strange / no one. Their center is washed old man David Andrews. Their right guard is Onwenu, who used to be kind of good, but, like, really, really regressed hard last year. Maybe he comes back. Right tackle is 34-year-old Morgan Moses, they just signed, who's maybe league average. League average tight end, Hunter Henry. Their wide receiver 1 is currently Kayshon Boutte. Their wide receiver 2 would be projected to be Mac Hollins. And then their slot wide receivers, DeMario Douglas, the running backs, Ramondre Stevenson. So I would say they have probably, if you're optimistic, 4 players out of all of that are roughly league average at their position. And that's tight end, slot wide receiver, running back, and right guard. And then they have a couple players that might be passable low-end starters in their right tackle and center. And then that leaves wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, left tackle, and left guard that are substantially sub-replacement level. So, I mean, I'm big believer in Drake May, and I'll continue to be. But it is, like, malpractice. I don't understand, like, really. I really wish they just didn't draft him. Because, like, if this was the plan, like, they're not qualified to have a rookie quarterback on their roster right now. They're not up to the task. They don't deserve it.
I will say, like, this was part of my problem with Drake May's price, right? As it was, because a lot of it was baked in as they're going to spend so much money. I think people were already putting T. Higgins into Patriots uniform. They were already putting Chris Godwin into Pat's uniform.
We were doing Brown jersey swaps. Like, it was a fun week on Patriots Twitter last week. Not so much this week.
So it's like they have all this cap space. There's no way they're not going to build around Drake May, and they're going to get the most. So I always had that. And then guess what we're going to do next year? We're going to do the same thing with every free agent eligible wide receiver. And I'm just losing more and more faith in the Patriots, like, building a responsible offense. And then you get to answer the Josh McDaniels question is, how does he handle this? And how does he work this offense? And Drake May is, like, he's a really good player. Like, he is every trait I think you could want in a guy, but I think he's a heck of a volatile asset. Like, I think he's going to make some wow plays. That man's running for his damn life all year, which is going to be great for fantasy. His scramble rate was insane it's going to be out of necessity. The Patriots are just a hard watch. This offseason has been a hard watch. Brutal, man. I think the only thing that remotely saves them is like, I don't know, draft Travis Hunter, say he's a wide receiver, and just hope it's enough. I don't know.
They're fucked, but Elise May runs, so it's like that's the one saving grace is
Brett
that
nails this. They could have had McConkey.
Yeah,
I was just going to call out Brett and say that please just stop typing things in the chat that are I don't know
but
if you guys
they got Polk and Baker instead. So
my anxiety levels have just been slowly increasing, like with every word in this segment. I've been keeping my mouth shut, but yeah, man, I just like thank God that God invented Red Zone so that I can watch something else on Sundays is basically what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Keeneland
like
1 year. Yeah.
The fact that we wouldn't send a second round pick or literally whatever it would take. It's not like we're hitting on any of these freaking picks anyway. Just to see what Drake May can do with a competent NFL wide receiver. That was like one job for the offseason. Legitimately. I understand that Vrabel's going to come in and his whole thing is going to be like, we're going to build up the competency on the defense. We're going to find our culture guys. Like this is a slow build type of deal. I get all of that. But this is kind of exactly what I was afraid of when it was Vrabel who was hired. Not that we need to relitigate all of that because we did that for plenty of hours on this show. But yeah, this is pretty much exactly what I was afraid of when the front office opted to not go with just like a more forward thinking, like offensive minded head coach. Yeah, it's just, it's rough, man. Yeah. Can we talk about another?
Do you remember, like, I'm going to stick by Drake May regardless, because I think he was legitimately awesome and he runs. And so the ceiling is going to be worth waiting for. And I think he's going to have enough good games mixed in due to the running even this year. Like, do you guys remember the Patriots offense Drake May took over and just like how apocalyptically bad it was? Like, this is just so far from being a viable situation. Like, there's a lot of Patriots fans that I talk to very regularly because I frequent a lot of Celtics group chats. And like, I just don't think that Patriots fans generally, at least maybe Ryan excluded, like fully appreciate how far away from contention their roster is. Like, I just think that like there's bad teams and then there's like a tier break and then there's the Patriots. Like there's a reason they had so much cap space because they haven't drafted a meaningful. They went basically like 5 straight years without drafting anyone of consequence until hitting on Gonzalez in May. Like it's so bad.
It apocalyptic is right. Like they should have just held on Jacoby Myers on this team would be like a wide receiver 1. Like
yeah, they basically traded him for
Jacoby Myers wanted too much money. That was we can't spend
just
our
Juju his money
based on Jacoby Myers. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's rough, man, and they're right in there with the Texans to me. Like, except the Texans were like, we had something good going, and now they're going in reverse. This is just like people actually thought Vrabel was going to come in and his top priority was fix the offense. No, like obviously not. His first order of business was signing Harold Landry, who couldn't rush to the front of the line in Starbucks, let alone the passer. Like it some of the worst win rates in football last year, but he's a Vrabel guy. I don't know, man.
Right? It's like Matt Collins is a McDaniels former player. Carlton Davis is their DC's former player. Harold Landry is Vrabel's former player. Like, it's like all they like, even the supposedly good signings, it's like they're just running down the almanac of like guys they know. Like, it's just like the most nepotistic organization. Like, it's so frustrating for me.
He's so volatile to me. This is kind of part of the reason I was like willing to pass on May for like Bo Nix in startups this year. Just Drake May might be 24 by the time the Patriots offense is, worthy. Bo Nix might already be 24, 25, but at least they're there. It's
Like Cooper
It's an
Kupp
interesting spot.
has shared with some close to him that he's curious about the prospect of playing for the Patriots.
But that's where we're at. We're at like guys who are totally dust, who are just want a job.
A guy that and the fan base will lose their goddamn minds over this. By the way, like this will be celebrated as like we just traded for AJ Brown when Cooper Kupp.
Sam Adams will be popped like champagne upon the 31-year-old torn ACL. Stephon Diggs, 1 year, $8 million, up to $20 million with incentives. That's incoming.
That's where we're at. I saw Amari Cooper in the chat later, and I was like, yeah, maybe. And then I was like, no, he's washed. Like, what? Not. It's like, oh, they could just throw X amount of money. Do you know how desperate? Not desperate, but do you know how much you're gonna have to overpay to get anybody there? I saw Keenan Allen for 1 year. Why would he go? Like, just take 1 year less money anywhere where you have a chance to win. Like, I don't know, dude. This is brutal.
We'll see. May, I still believe in May. I mean, he's gonna run. He's gonna score some fantasy points, and we're gonna have like the Drake May EPA wars. If I see one person like get into an argument with me about Drake May's like EPA while he has Vidarian Lowe at left tackle and Keyshawn Booty tier one, I'm gonna be so annoyed. But I would say I'm more concerned with just like I think him performing far below his capabilities from a real life results perspective than I am with him not scoring fantasy points. Like I just think he's gonna throw deep and run enough to get you a high-end QB2 year, even despite everything. And I think the talent will continue to shine through to keep his value reasonably propped up. But yeah, I mean, to get the point where he's actually realizing the ceiling he's capable of, they need to become a completely different organization.
Yeah, get ready to play the long game here, guys. I think a team doing it the right way is Chicago. They got their offensive coordinator. They're getting their offensive line.
Yeah.
Obviously, the fantasy pundits are mocking Genty and every other fantasy relevant player to the perfect quote unquote landing spots. But I think they're a team that got it right. We've talked a lot of negative here, but a team that's gotten it right is definitely Chicago as of right now, if not for anything more than the effort. The effort that Chicago has put in, I have to applaud. I feel like it's worth noting. There's a lot of teams that have like kind of stood
the Pats that have hired Ben Johnson.
Yeah. It all roads lead back to Ryan's suffering. Not great, but let's get
I'm gonna have to. I've been muting myself throughout this to let out exactly the noise that Jacob just made.
I don't even like the Patriots. Why did they have to abduct my favorite little child and like make me have to hope for good things? Like I would love to just be making fun of the Patriots right now, but I can't. I have to suffer alongside them.
Oh man, do we have final thoughts before we get out of here? I don't think those are very quiet winners and losers. I think those are very loud.
Yeah, they were loud.
I will.
There's like three names I just want to say. We don't have to talk about them.
Josh Palmer.
No, not him. Anyone but him. So Samaje Perine to the Bengals. I think this is good for Chase Brown. The talk with them was they wanted basically like a third down, long down and distance back to pass block and take some of those snaps like off of his plate. Samaje Perine is exactly that. He's not like a serious threat for touches. Is that necessarily going to stop them from adding a running back on day 2 or 3? Not necessarily. Lowers the chances. You're pretty damn happy if, as a Chase Brown dynasty owner, if he's walking in to 2025 with Samaje Perine as the RB2 on the roster. We talked about Jalen Warren already. I think Jacob covered that pretty well, just in terms of like, if you guys for years, if you've been fighting like the Jalen Warren is better than Najee and he should be starting war, like his price is lower or as low as it's ever been basically throughout all of that right now, because everyone just expects that he's going to lose his job immediately to a drafted running back. He may not, but
he might lose his job to Kenneth Gainwell, Ryan. He's a Super Bowl champion running back.
But this is like your chance, guys. Come on. Kind of a quiet one was Elijah Mitchell to the Chiefs. I don't think Elijah Mitchell's going to matter on the Chiefs. I just think it's interesting from like a 49ers backup sweepstakes perspective. Mitchell is kind of officially out of that now. They did give like a weird 1-year deal to Patrick Taylor. Did not really expect that one, but
And
if
they
you're
gave
like
Jordan Mason like pretty legit cash, despite letting every single other person leave their team.
they gave Jordan Mason legit cash. Did I miss this one?
Yeah, he got the same tender Warren got. He got the round 2 RFA tender, so that's
yes.
$5 million.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
I have heard a lot of like he's
So
going to
that's
get
more
traded,
guaranteed
but
money for Jordan Mason than Najee Harris. I don't think he's going to get traded because I don't understand who would trade for Jordan Mason.
I'm
we have like
I'm
the
only
draft class of the year. Oh,
I'm
I've
only
heard the same.
reiterating
Yeah.
what I've heard from it.
No, I've heard and seen the same. I think that's a lot of San Francisco 49ers people leaking to other people that he's going to get traded. I'm sure they would be happy to get assets for him, but I doubt it. But the fact they put that kind of tender on him suggests like he's going to be on the roster. And I don't know. I would say like before this week, I was in the camp of Garendo is more likely to be the RB2. It seems like it's kind of a toss-up now between him and Mason to be that RB2.
I lean Garendo not just because I was the leader of the Garendo marching band, but more so that like Mason was just bad last year. Like he obviously had like the early run, but man, he was not a good NFL running back when he came back, at least not for fantasy at all. Whereas Garendo adds like legit speed, legit burst, legit long play, explosive
like
play.
An entity in the receiving game too, where Jordan Mason was like setting records for like lowest targets per route run by a running back at one point.
Yeah.
Like midway through the season. So yeah, I am also gonna prefer Garendo there, but yeah, I mean to Jacob's point, if he's not traded like all of the rumors are stating, he's definitely on the rock. Like nothing is guaranteed ever in 49ers training camp. No guy's spot is ever guaranteed, seemingly. Certainly not Jordan Mason or Isaac Garendo, but
running backs.
I believe in Garendo. I'll lean toward him, but yeah, those are the two we're looking at now. I think that was it for me. We talked about Brenton Strange plenty and the Jaguars. So yeah, that's all I had on free agency.
Yeah, I think
For me.
I think it would be very hard to bring up even another player. I think we covered quite literally everything here, which I love that for us. Okay.
And then one other one is a quiet one that I haven't seen discussed. Ladd McConkey was a guy that a lot of people were all waiting for the other shoe to drop on. If they're going to add another wide receiver, they're going to add another wide receiver. I'm sure they'll draft somebody, but no Godwin, no Higgins, no Metcalf, who was rumored to go there, no Adams, who was rumored to go there. Dodged a lot of bullets. At this point, it's either going to be like a Cooper Kupp or a Keenan Allen reunion, which like cool by all means. Or they're going to draft someone in a class that everybody says is not very strong a wide receiver. So whoever they draft or add at this point, I don't think is going to be a particular threat to Ladd McConkey for the wide receiver 1 role in LAC. I think very good chance he's a wide receiver 1 next year.
Yeah, he definitely survived 100%. I think we're good. I will say once again, we'll just pour one out for our guy DeAndre Hopkins. You got half of what Tutu Atwell got. We're pouring one out.
Michael Crabtree, Des Bryant, Deshaun Jackson, Odell Beckham.
The Ravens.
Did Robinson get more than him? He signed right after, right?
Yeah.
The Ravens have now overtaken the Titans for like where former stud receivers go to die. It sucks. And the Ravens saw DeAndre Hopkins drop that pass in the Super Bowl. And we're like, that's who we need for clutch situations. That's the guy we need on this team to overcome our fumbling and bumbling.
I was in a group chat where there was an argument of should the Patriots have outbid the Ravens for DeAndre Hopkins today? That's how bad it's gotten, Ryan.
Oh my God.
Never mind the fact that I guarantee you that DeAndre Hopkins, who probably has like $180 million of career earnings, has surely no interest in playing his final NFL season for the New England Patriots. But anyway.
Yeah, it just makes me sad. Let's pour one out.
Yeah.
I think that does it. Great show.
Are you gonna buy a jersey? Are you gonna get a
No.
Ravens jersey from you?
No, it turns out that every jersey I end up ordering, they either punch their girlfriend in the face in the elevator, they
Congrats
commit
on the,
other crimes like Terrell
Xavier
Suggs,
Worthy jersey.
Ray Lewis, murder charges. Justin Tucker's been taken off the wall because he's a rapist.
Right. Yeah.
Every jersey I end up getting, just something horrendous
Well, at
seems
least
to
you got the
happen.
murderer behind you.
I got the murder right
Okay,
behind me.
Alleged murder.
Allegedly, we got Suggs and his assault trial. Not to mention, Suggs is just a G who's like threatening people with guns, and yeah, it's the Ravens, baby.
Suggs
But
is just
I'm
about
not
that
putting
life.
that. I'm not putting that curse on anyone else to roll into B more and just go down a dark path, because that just seems to be what happens. So,
one quick thing before we sign off. In a league I'm in, Russell Wilson just got traded for Joe Milton, basically straight up with like.
give me Milton, baby.
Joe
Yeah,
Milton
why didn't the Colts do that? Like, why couldn't that would have been fun? You know, like screw Daniel Jones and zero
Teams.
upside. Like, why
Can
did
we
they
just?
give
Can
up-
I actually talk about that for a brief second? Just a brief second. Be like, why don't they just trade for this? But teams don't. Milton played once and he balled. Teams are no longer letting him go now until they have to pay him. So every year for the next 2 years, we're going to hear, just trade Milton. Why doesn't someone just trade for Milton? Does someone go,
Well,
they're not
Pickens
doing
Josh
it.
Dobbs to a backup level contract.
They're not
That-
trading
rumor,
Milton.
the rumor right now is that we're looking to trade Milton, and I don't know why. That doesn't really. I don't think that
I
benefits.
know why. Because they
in any
need
way.
more picks to address the 47 gaping holes on their roster.
I don't see it, man. They're paying him
Can
nothing.
we just do Adonai Mitchell and a fifth for Joe Milton?
That'd actually be
Probably
lit.
Actually, I actually wouldn't hate
That
that.
actually would be kind of lit. I could
Please.
talk
You know
myself
what?
into AD Mitchell.
Actual who says no?
Like, no, neither of them
Post that
should
on
say
Twitter.
no.
Yeah,
We need
Ryan,
a
can you
quarterback.
post that
We need
from
a
the Data
receiver.
Suite
Let's do
account?
this.
I will not post it from the Data Suite account. I can post it from my account, and we can.
There we
can
go.
find out who says no.
Yeah, we'll do a legitimate who
Well,
says no.
AD Mitchell has got to be the most like luxury asset in the world. He's going to be the wide receiver 4 in a team that's going to throw 18 passes per game. Like, let's get Joe Milton.
Jeez. Oh my goodness. All right, that's gonna do it. That's it. That's it for the show. I'm not here next week, but Jacob, Ryan, you guys have a fantastic host. Let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah, we got Matt Toscano of Remember the Tight Ends, which is I'm willing to say is Substack's preeminent tight end newsletter. He'll be coming on. We're going to talk primarily about the 2025 rookie class. If anybody has any questions you'd like me to ask Max, either about the 25 tight end rookie class, about the position generally, or whatever else, feel free to shoot me a DM, and I will try to get it on the show sheet. Really excited for that one.
Yeah, right on. I love it. This is gonna be the first show I miss for non-illness reasons in like 4 years. Just got some stuff happening, so I got to do that. With that being said, I'm gonna miss you guys next week, but enjoy the show. Tune in for a Dynasty Points Market Report, where Buck and I are gonna break down by Friday when that podcast gets recorded. There's going to be so many trades that have happened with newly signed and traded assets. We are going to break down so many real life trades on Dynasty Points Market Report, releasing Saturday. Not going to miss that. As always, leave a comment down below. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like from the podcast. Always helps us a lot. We thank everybody for listening and tuning in. Without you guys, there is no show. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose in your best days. Or it's been tilting. Good night, everybody. What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.